Hello to all my dear followers. Welcome to the second season of What If Naruto Was Trained by Tsunade and Fell in Love with INO? As always, if you want more fanfic like that, let me know with a like, comment and subscription. Now then, enjoy!
Chapter 9 Days Off and the Council. It has been 1 month since the battle on the bridge. The bridge was finally complete, and the Land of Waves was now connected to the Land of Fire. Even though it took 1 month, Tsunade had finished the bridge ahead of schedule thanks to Naruto's clones and the villagers not being scared of Gato anymore. In the past month, a lot has happened to the Land of Waves and its people thanks to the shinobis of the Leaf Village. Naruto and his sensei had used their wood release to help rebuild the houses in the village. In some cases, they completely broke down some houses and rebuilt them new. Naruto made more fruit-bearing trees grow in the surrounding area to provide some food for the people along with help some of the men fish and hunt for meat. He had also handed all the money he took from Gato's mansion along with some of the valuable items he gathered over to the villager so they can rebuild their lives. The lives of the people in the Land of Waves were starting to return to the way it was before Gato showed up, and in their eyes, it was all thanks to Naruto. Naruto was probably the busiest person in the entire Wave Country over the past month. When he was not helping the villagers rebuild their lives, he was busy getting Senju Enterprise underway. He had originally planned to ask Tsunade to oversee things for him here in the Wave Country, but the old man refused, claiming he has no expertise in the business. He instead pointed Naruto in the direction of his daughter, who apparently is a natural when it comes to business affairs. Apparently, Tsunade is the one who manages the finances for Tsunade's construction business while the old man simply builds stuff. It took some convincing, but Naruto managed to get to agree to work for him after he told her that the Land of Waves would get 30% of the profit from transactions done there. In the past month, Naruto and Tsunade had gone through all of Gato's documents and records in order to figure out where all of his hubs were for trading and who his suppliers were. The first thing they did was send out messages to all the hubs that the company was now under new ownership. They made it clear to all the hubs that employees previously employed by Gato were welcome to stay on so long as they accepted to work for the new owner. Those that do not wish to recognize the change in ownership should consider themselves unemployed. Gato had shipping hubs in a lot of minor countries and hidden villages, along with having hubs in both the village hidden in the mist and the village hidden in the clouds. The majority of the hubs and suppliers responded back to Naruto and Tsunade agreeing to stay on, while the hub in the cloud village and a few other minor countries did not respond. Naruto told Tsunade to cast them aside and consider them not part of the company. The second thing they did was cut ties with a few suppliers who supplied Gato with his illegal goods like drugs. After a few weeks of getting everyone in line, Senju Enterprises began operations, much to Naruto's delight. Currently, Naruto and his sensei along with Team 7 back on the soils of the Land of Fire in front of the entrance of the now completed bridge. There was a large crowd in front of them. All the villagers had come to see them off and to thank them once more. Tsunade and his family were all standing in the front of the crowd smiling at the group of leaf shinobis. "We could have never finished the bridge with you," Tsunade said with a grateful smile on his face. "You all have gone above and beyond for us. Words cannot express how profoundly grateful we are to you all," he said, while his daughter and the villagers behind him all nod their heads in agreement. "Do be careful," Tsunade said with a warm smile on her face while holding a clipboard with some papers in her hands. "Thank you for your kind hospitality this past month," Kakashi said with a one-eyed smile. "Think nothing of it," Tsunade said while waving his hands. "You all are always welcome here anytime you wish," he added with a smile, causing a few of the villagers to shout in agreement. Now, don't go getting all mushy on us," Naruto said with a warm smile. "We'll come to visit again," he added. "You promise you will?" Inari said as he began to cry, slightly causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at him. Shaking his head slightly, Naruto walked up and bopped the little body on his head with his fist. "I have a business to run here. Of course, I'm coming back," Naruto as he hit the boy on the head. "Ow! You big meanie!" Inari yelled as tears streamed out of his eyes, causing everyone to chuckle. Naruto shook his head before he turned to the Tsunade and spoke. "Take care of things here," he said with a smile. "I'll be in touch regularly," he added, causing her to smile and nod. "You got it," "Boss," he said, causing him to chuckle before turning to the old man. "Try not to be a pain in the ass for Tsunade and the rest of the village," Naruto said in a teasing tone, causing Tsunade's eyebrow to twitch while the villagers burst out laughing. "Why, you damn brat," Tsunade yelled while shaking his fist in the air. "Naruto, time to hit the road," Yamato called out from behind Naruto, causing the blonde to nod his head before waving goodbye to everyone. The group of leaf shinobis then began walking away from the bridge and villagers. "It is all thanks to that boy that we were able to finish the bridge," Tsunade said as they all watched the group walking away. "It is thanks to him the wave country is back to its former glory," he added with a proud look on his face. "And with his company being here, the country to prosper even more than it did before," Tsunade added, causing everyone to nod. "With this bride and his company, the land of wave has an incredibly bright future," she added with a smile. "Speaking of the bridge, what are you going to name it now that it is completed, Tsunade?" one of the villagers asked. Tsunade did not even take a second to think about it before he responded. "The Great Naruto Bridge," he proclaimed proudly as he stared at the fading images of the group walking away. "That's a wonderful name," Tsunade said while the others shouted a chorus of agreement. With Naruto, the group of shinobis was currently walking through the forest of the Land of Fire on their way back to the Leaf Village. Kakashi and Yamato were at the rear of the group watching all of their students, while Sasuke and Sakura were at the front of the pack, leaving Naruto and Sai in the middle. From the moment they left the bridge, Sakura began pestering Sasuke about going on a date with her, much to the annoyance of the Uchiha and everyone else in the group. Naruto honestly did not understand why the girl was so obsessed with the Uchiha. The boy clearly had no interest in her, yet she continues to pursue him. Not wanting to listen to the pink-haired girl making a fool of herself, he decided to turn to the two Jonin senseis behind them and ask a question. "Can we pick up the pace, sensei?" he asked as he looked back with a pleading expression on his face. Getting the general idea as to why the blonde wanted to pick up the pace, the two Jonin chuckled together before Kakashi spoke. "What's wrong, Naruto?" the one-eyed Jonin asked in a teasing manner. "Not enjoying the peaceful atmosphere?" he asked, causing Yamato to chuckle. "There is nothing peaceful about this atmosphere," Naruto replied with a groan, causing the two Jonins to chuckle. "All right then, let's pick it up," Kakashi said loudly to get everyone's attention. The two Jonins and four Genins then jumped up onto the trees of the forest and began tree-hopping towards the village at a decent pace. They could not push as much as Naruto would have liked due to the other Genins not being able to keep up. Next day, it took the group an entire day to reach the Leaf Village, having to stop and take breaks periodically because of Sasuke and Sakura. Sasuke had done a better job keeping up, but Sakura seriously lacked stamina. Seeing that the girl would have collapsed if they chose to keep going through the night, Kakashi and Yamato decided that they should stop and rest for the night before resuming their journey at sunrise. That is exactly what they did, and now they were all standing in front of the village gates. "Home sweet home," Naruto said with a grin on his face as he stared through the gates and into the village. The group then began making their way to the guard station at the gates to check in. "Team 7 and 11 returning from C-rank missions," Kakashi said as he arrived at the two Chunins assigned at the guard station. "Ah, Kakashi and Yamato," one of the guards said. "Welcome back," they greeted as they make a note of their return in the logs. "Hey Izumo. Hey Kotetsu," Naruto greeted with a smile, causing the two Chunins to smile at him. "Naruto," the duo shouted happily, getting the attention of a few villagers and causing Naruto to chuckle. "Anything interesting happened while we were away?" he asked, causing the two guards to shake their heads. "No, it's been pretty boring," Izumo said in a bored tone as he slouched forward. "A few of the villagers were complaining that you weren't around as much," Kotetsu said while Izumo nodded. "Apparently Team 11 was greatly missed by the villagers," Izumo added, causing a look of jealousy to appear on the faces of Sasuke and Sakura, while Sai just had a creepy smile on his face. Naruto chuckled slightly with a bashful look on his face, causing his sensei to take on an amused look while looking at his student. "By the way, Kakashi," Kotetsu said in a serious voice while looking at the silver-haired Jonin, "Lord Hokage said to report to him as soon as your teams returned," he informed, causing the join to nod before turning to the two teams. "Let's go report to the Hokage," he said, earning a nod from all of the Genins. The group then began walking through the village on their way to the Hokage's office. As they walked through the village, villagers would stop and greet Sasuke and Naruto with warm smiles on their faces. Sasuke would just ignore all of them while he kept a cold look on his face. Naruto, on the other hand, smiled warmly with every villager that greeted him while kindly greeting a few of them back. As the teams reached the door to the Hokage's office, Kakashi stepped forward and knocked before waiting a few seconds. "Enter!" A familiar voice commanded, causing the join to open the door, and the two teams walked into the room to find the age-old Hokage sitting behind his desk smoking his pipe with two large piles of papers on either side of his desk. Team 7 and Team 11 reporting back from their C-rank missions, Kakashi said as he and Yamato stood forward, while Naruto then the other genins stood behind them. "Welcome back," the third Hokage said warmly as stared at the group with a relieved look on his face, as he saw that they had all returned unharmed before a stern look appeared on his face as he turned his attention to Kakashi. "Yamato, why don't you report on your mission first?" he added, never taking his eyes off the silver-haired Jonin, letting everyone know that the Hokage was not too pleased with Kakashi at the moment. "Right," Yamato said before he began giving the details of his and Naruto's mission to eliminate the bandits near Tenzaku quarters. The Hokage and Team 7 were incredibly impressed with Naruto and his sensei after hearing the mission report. The Hokage was even more impressed with the way Naruto conducted himself on the mission, not freezing up after his first kill. Most shinobi would need a few minutes to gather themselves after conducting the act, but he was pleased to hear Naruto concluded the mission, and then he dealt with his emotions afterward. Overall, the Hokage was extremely pleased. "Great job, you two," the Hokage complimented, causing Naruto to smile. "We also received reports from Tenzaku quarters of travelers no longer being harassed by bandits, so job well done," he said with a smile before reaching into his desk and pull out two storage scrolls and handed them to Yamato and Naruto. "Here is your payment for the mission," he said as Naruto and Yamato stepped forwards and called their respected scrolls. "Thank you, Lord Hokage," the two said simultaneously with a bow, as they accepted the scrolls, causing the old man to smile at them before he turned to Kakashi with a serious look on his face. "Now you, Kakashi," the third Hokage commanded, raising his voice slightly. Kakashi chuckled nervously before he began to recount the details of their mission, starting with their encounter with the Demon Brothers and his first fight with Zabuza to the battle on the bridge. To say that the third Hokage was surprised to hear Naruto was one to deal the final blow to Zabuza would be an understatement. However, when he found out Naruto killed about 50 thugs that worked for Gato in an instant, he was even more shocked. As shocked as he was, however, he was equally impressed. Kakashi then detailed the aftermath of the fight and the rebuilding of the Wave Country. It made the Hokage smile when he heard of Yamato and Naruto's efforts to help the people of the Wave Country. The kindness that Naruto showed reminded the third Hokage of his sensei, the first Hokage. "He is a lot like you, Lord Hashirama," the old man thought with a fond smile on his face as he took a puff of his pipe. "That was some excellent work from you all," he said as he looked at the newly minted genin. "This mission will go down in the official records as an A-rank mission. However, you all will only receive a C-rank mission payment due to the client only paying for such," he informed, causing everyone to nod their heads in understanding. "I believe both teams earned some time off to relax," he added, causing everyone to smile. "Team 7, you will get all of today and tomorrow off, while Team 11 will get all of today and the next 2 days off due to you completing back-to-back missions," the Hokage said, causing everyone to nod their heads once again. "Thank you, Lord Third," the genin all said with a bow, causing the old man to chuckle. "Okay, all of you are dismissed," he said as he waved them off. "Except you, Kakashi," he added sternly as the Jonin was about to leave. Yamato and all of the genin then exited the Hokage's office. As the doors closed behind them, they could hear the Hokage yelling at Kakashi. Shaking his head at the plight his friend was in, he turned his student and spoke as Team 7 went their separate ways. "We'll meet at our regular training ground after 2 days at 6 a.m. sharp," he commanded, causing Naruto to nod in understanding. "Enjoy your days off," he said before holding up a half-ram seal and disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto then held up a half-ram seal of his own and disappeared from the Hokage's building in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves. He reappeared in front of the gates of the Senju compound in a similar fashion to which he disappeared. Unlocking the security seal on the gate, he walked into the compound to see it was just the way he left it. Locking the gates behind him, he made his way to the main house and packed away his stuff. He placed his dirty clothes in the laundry basket before he made his way to the kitchen to see what he had to eat. Opening the fridge, he saw that a lot of the stuff that was there had gone bad, causing him to sigh. "I'm going to have to do some grocery shopping," he said as he closed the fridge and shook his head. He then walked to the hidden door leading to the vault and unlocked it for walking down the flight of stairs and unlocking the second door and walking into the vault filled with priceless scrolls and weapons. At the corner of the vault was a desk. Naruto walked up to the desk and slicked his wrist, unsealing the documents he got from Gato onto the desk. He then organized them the way he wanted before exiting the vault and resealing it as he left. Naruto then made his way to his bedroom where he stripped off all of his clothes and wrapped himself in a towel before making his way to the private hot spring located behind the main house. Under the Leaf Village. Deep under the Leaf Village, a frail old man with a cane in his left hand and bandages wrapped around the right side of his head, completely covering his right eye, was standing in front of a young shinobi who was kneeling in front of him. If Naruto were here, he would recognize this shinobi as Sai from Team 7. "I have something to report on Naruto Senju, Lord Danzo," Sai said as he looked to the old man, now identified as Danzo, with an impassive look on his face. "Are the rumors true?" Danzo asked as he stared down at his subordinate. "Yes, he possesses the wood-release bloodline of the first Hokage," Sai said in an emotionless tone. "I witnessed it with my own eyes," he added, causing the old man to nod. "How proficient is he in using it?" Danzo asked the boy. "He appears to be extremely proficient in using it," he said, causing the old man to grip his cane tightly, hearing the reply. It was not the reply for which he was hoping. He was hoping Sai would tell him that the blonde was not that proficient with his bloodline, which would allow him to offer to help the boy learn to use his bloodline, and in turn bring the boy over to his side, but that was not the case. "He appears to be more proficient with it than his sensei," Sai added, causing Danzo to grit his teeth before he responded. "That is to be expected," he said as he grits his teeth in frustration. "He is the real deal while his sensei is just a copy," he added before letting out a small sigh. Now the boy has access to the Senju clan's extensive library, along with all of the first Hokage's jutsu scrolls. His proficiency from here on will only get better, he said with frustration ever so present in his voice. "What are your orders, Lord Danzo?" Sai asked emotionlessly as he bowed his head. "Leave the Senju to me," Danzo said to his subordinate. The third Hokage's teachings were probably ingrained into him since he was a baby by his grandmother, he said with a scowl. "He may be beyond our grasp, but the Uchiha isn't," he added. "Sasuke Uchiha has awakened his Sharingan," Sai reported, causing Danzo to nod in satisfaction. "Good, he is coming along nicely," Danzo said while nodding. "I should approach him soon," he said. "Continue with your mission and continue to gather information on the Senju," Danzo ordered while looking down at Sai. "We must know the extent of his abilities in case he needs to be eliminated," he added. "As you wish, Lord Danzo," Sai said with a bow. "Dismissed," Danzo said as he stamped his cane on the ground, causing Sai to vanish in a puff of smoke. "Damn you, Hiruzen," Danzo thought to himself as he stared out into the darkness. "First you are hiding the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and now you hid a Senju who possesses the first Hokage's bloodline from me," Danzo thought angrily. In his mind, the third Hokage was playing him for a fool. That boy would have made the perfect weapon for the village, he thought while shaking his head and walking away. "I will have my day, Hiruzen. I will have my day," he said as he walked away into the darkness. With Naruto, dressed in long black pants and a white t-shirt with the Senju clan symbol on the back, Naruto put on his sandals and began making his way out of the house. After all the food in the fridge had gone bad, he decided he was going to eat out. Exiting the compound and locking the gates, Naruto began strolling down the street. The sun had already set, and the stars were out. The street was illuminated by streetlights, and the Hidden Leaf's nightlife was in full swing. As he was walking, few people would recognize him and greet him, to which he returned their greetings. After walking for about 15 minutes, Naruto came to a halt in front of a ramen shop with the Ichiraka ramen written on the front. Ramen! Naruto thought as he smiled and licked his lips before entering the ramen stand. Welcome, the old ramen chef said from behind the counter with a warm smile. What can I get for you? He asked as Naruto sat down on one of the stools. One large bowl of miso ramen, Naruto said in an excited tone to the ramen chef. One large miso ramen coming right up, the ramen chef said before he turned and looked further into the shop. I am. One large bowl of miso ramen, he shouted to someone in the back. Coming right up, Dad, a girl shouted back. 2 minutes later, a large bowl of steaming hot ramen was in front of Naruto. Thanks for the food, Naruto shouted before he dug into his food. The moment the taste of ramen hit his palate, his eyes went wide. Swallowing the mouthful of noodles, he turned to the ramen chef and his daughter and spoke with stars in his eyes. This is the best ramen I have ever eaten, he said with a jubilant look on his face. Haha, glad you like it, young man, the old man said with a warm smile while his daughter nodded. I'll have another bowl, please, Naruto said while his mouth was filled with noodles. Chuckling at the blonde's enthusiasm, the ramen chef began preparing another bowl. At the end of it all, Naruto ate 5 bowls of ramen before finally stopping himself. His grandmother would probably kill him if she found out he ate any more. Paying the ramen chef, who he learned was named Tuchi, he began making his way back home. Upon arriving back in the compound, Naruto went down to the basement where the library was located. Upon unlocking the seals and he entered the large library which he previously had his clones read everything that was in there, but there was still some stuff that bothered him. Making 10 shadow clones, Naruto turned to them and gave out orders. 5 of you go over there and read those scrolls about my great-great-grandfathers would release once more. He ordered to the first 5 clones before he turned to the second set. You 5 go find some books on advanced nature transformation techniques, he said, causing the clones to all nod and began moving their respected sections. The original Naruto then began walking through the library, getting a good look at everything for himself. When he got to the very end of the library, he saw a painting was hanging on the wall. This is an odd place for a painting, he thought to himself as he examined the painting. It was a painting of a raging whirlpool. Naruto had to admit it was well painted. It was probably in the library a long time, but the colors were still vibrant and vivid. Looking closely at the painting, he could see some ruins written into the image, causing his eyebrows to raise. Well, this is interesting, he said to himself. Reaching out and placing his palm on the painting, he channeled chakra into it, causing a sealing array to become visible. Examining it, he could see that it was a similar security seal to the one that was on the hidden door to the vault. Evaluating his hypothesis, he bit his thumb and smeared some blood over the seal before pulsing his chakra in a specific pattern. A second after that, a larger sealing formula appeared before a wooden door revealed itself. Opening the door and causing the lights to turn on automatically, Naruto saw an empty chamber with a stone slab in the center of the chamber. Narrowing his eyes and stepping into the room, Naruto could see sealing ruins and kanji were written all along the floor, walls, and ceiling. All of them seemed to originate from or leading to the stone slab in the middle. Examining everything while moving closer to the stone, Naruto could not help but be impressed by everything. This is some advanced stuff, he thought while looking around. He understood some of what he was looking at, but there was still a lot that he did not fully understand. His knowledge of sealing jutsus he got from his godfather Jiraiya, who was a competent seals master but was still very lacking, especially when compared to the 4th Hokage and the Uzumaki clan. From what I can make out, this seems to be the master sealing matrix for the security seals around the compound, Naruto noted as he examined the seals further. It was an intricate and complex security seal made up of a combination of other seals that each serve a different function when it comes to the overall defense of the compound. There were blood seals to recognize Senju blood, but there was a separate seal spliced into the blood seal to allow non-Senju clan members to enter the compound by having their blood recorded into the seal. There were a few barrier seals linked to the blood seal that prevented anyone not part of the blood records from entering the compound. Not to mention the numerous lethal traps linked to each barrier seal designed to trigger if anyone tries to breach the compound or one of the barriers. Man, the Uzumaki clan sure were something, Naruto thought as he continued to examine the seals. No doubt this was set by Grandma Mito. He thought as he remembered hearing stories about the woman from his grandmother growing up. Hashirama Senju may have been feared as the god of shinobi, but his wife was a force to be reckoned with, especially when it came to fuinjutsu. Smiling slightly to himself, Naruto bit his thumb once more and smeared blood across the sealing formula before placing his right palm over it and pulsing his chakra in a specific pattern. After finishing with the last pulse, the seals in the entire chamber lit up, illuminating the room even brighter. After 2 seconds of glowing, Naruto felt a stinging pain from his right palm, which was resting on the stone, causing him to wince slightly. The pain did not last long. After 5 seconds it went away, causing Naruto to remove his palm from the stone and look at it. When he looked down at the inside of his palm, he saw a smaller version of the sealing matrix in his palm, causing him to raise an eyebrow. "Well, this is new," he said to himself as he stared at the small seal in his palm. As he was staring at it, the seal began to fade away as though it was being absorbed into his skin. After the seal vanished from his palm, his eyes widened in slight shock. "This is..." He trailed off as he felt control over the security seal around the entire compound. "Master control of the security seal," he said with a smile as he realized that he no longer had to lock and lock the seals on the gate every time he left the compound. Now all he needs to do was lock it and he should be able to exit and enter without any risk. Smiling to himself, Naruto exited the chamber and resealed the door before making his way out of the library, leaving his lines in the to continue their research. He then made his way to his bedroom in order to get some sleep. Next day, it was around 7 in the morning. The sun was already up in the sky above the Hidden Leaf Village. Standing in the kitchen of the main house of the Senju compound was Naruto, dressed in long black cargo pants and a black long-sleeved muscle t-shirt that clung to his body, showing off his well-toned muscles. He was drinking a cup of coffee, staring out into the backyard, planning his day and mulling over the information the clones gathered in the library last night. Thanks to him having 2 days off, he figured he should get some training done along with cleaning up the compound a bit. Finishing his coffee, Naruto exited the main house and stood in the main courtyard of the compound. Snapping his fingers, he caused a single shadow clone to appear in front of him. "I need you to go buy groceries and restock the kitchen," he said as he reached into his pocket and tossed his frog-shaped wallet to the clone. "You got it, boss," the clone said as it caught the wallet before disappearing in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves. Naruto then made the clone hand seal before he spoke. "Shadow Clone Jutsu," he shouted, causing a large puff of smoke to appear in front of him. When the smoke cleared, 50 identical copies of Naruto were all standing there staring at the original. Flicking his wrist, Naruto activated the storage steel on his wrist, unsealing a medium-sized storage scroll. He then tossed the scroll into the air before holding up a half-ram seal, causing a puff of smoke to surround the scroll before 50 smaller scrolls rained down from the sky into the hands of each of the clones. "Inside each of those scrolls are brushes with ink and sealing papers," he said impassively as he watched every clone caught a scroll. "I want you all to practice some of the sealing techniques the other clones learned from the library," he commanded before pointing to one of the empty houses in the compound and spoke again. "Use one of those houses to work if you want," he added. "Sure thing, boss," the 50 clones said simultaneously before making their way to unoccupied houses. As that set of clones went out to do their jobs, Naruto once again held up the clone hand seal before shouting once more. "Multi-shadow clone jutsu," he yelled as he put a bit more chakra into this one. There was a large puff of smoke in front of Naruto, far larger than the one previously. As the cloud of smoke disappeared, a large group of about 150 clones stood in front of the original Naruto. "I want you all to clean up the compound," Naruto said loudly to the clones. "Cut the grass, trim the hedges, uproot all of those dead flowers around the trees, and trim the trees," he ordered, causing the group clones to groan. "Can't we hire someone to do this?" one brave clone asked, causing Naruto's eyebrow to twitch slightly before he turned to the clone and snapped his finger, causing the clone to disappear in a puff of smoke. "Anyone else got any complaints?" he asked while eyeing each clone. "Nope," one replied. "None from me," another said while holding up its hands. "I like doing hard labor," another said, amusing Naruto. "Me too," chimed in another clone. "All right, enough," Naruto shouted, silencing all of them. "Get to work!" he commanded, causing the clones to scatter. Sighing to himself while shaking his head, Naruto placed his hands in his pocket and began walking in the direction of the private training ground inside the compound. Similar to when he first visited the training ground on his first day in the village, Naruto was taken in the beautiful sights of the compound as he walked through it. Upon arrival at the large training ground, the blonde made his way to the center of the training ground before once again holding up the clone hand seal. "Multi-shadow clone jutsu," he shouted as he channeled way more chakra into the technique than before. There was a large puff of smoke that covered the entire training ground. When the cloud of smoke vanished, the entire training ground was filled with identical copies of Naruto. There had to be over 2,000 shadow clones in the training ground, all standing there looking at the original Naruto standing in the center. "Listen up," Naruto shouted loudly, getting all of the clones' attention. "I want you all to create a wooden pillar in front of you," he shouted, causing the clones to do as they were told. It did not take 5 seconds before the entire training ground was filled with over 2,000 wooden pillars about 10 feet tall and 2 feet wide. "Our main goal over these next 2 days is to increase our affinity to both water and earth chakra natures," he shouted as he walked between a few clones and pillars. "By the end of these 2 days, our control over the water and earth chakra natures should be equal to or greater than our control over the wind nature. Are we clear?" he shouted/asked. "Yes, boss," 2,000 clones shouted back, causing Naruto to smile. "All right then," he said with a smirk. "Half of you focus on water, while the other half focus on earth," he said as he made his way to one of the corners of the training ground. Each of the clones then placed their hands on their respected wooden pillar and began using their chakra to either try and soak the entire wood pillar or turn the pillar to dirt. As the clones were working and Naruto was weaving through each of them, they all suddenly stopped as the memory from one of the clones cleaning the compound registered in their heads. A few moments earlier, in front of the gates of the Senju compound, a single shinobi wearing an animal-style porcelain mask that resembled an eagle landed in front of the open gates and tried to walk into the compound. As he was about to enter the compound, the Umbu operative walked right into what would appear to be an invisible wall. "What the?" the eagle-masked Umbu said/asked in confusion before walking back up and reaching out with his hand, touching the invisible barrier. "A barrier of some kind," he noted in fascination. "Something I can help you with?" came a voice from the other side of the barrier, knocking the Umbu out of his thought. "Lord Senju," the Umbu said in surprise as he saw Naruto standing in front of him on the other side of the barrier, holding some withered-up flowers in his hands. "Lord Hokage has summoned the council. Your presence is requested," the Umbu informed, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. "Well, I am just a shadow clone," the Naruto in front of the Umbu said, surprising the man. "I'll let the boss know though," he said before dispelling himself and dropping all of the dried-up flowers before the eagle Umbu could say anything else. With Naruto present time, after receiving the clone's memory, Naruto sighed to himself as he turned to the large group of shadow clones in the training ground and saw all of them looking at him. "You all continue with what you are doing. I'll go to the council meeting," he said, causing all of them to nod their head and return to their training. Naruto then held up a half-ram seal and disappeared in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves, only to appear at the front gates in a similar fashion, surprising the Umbu operative. "Where is the council chamber?" he asked as he appeared. Without missing a beat, the Umbu agent replied. "It is located in the basement of the building which the Hokage's office is," the eagle-masked Umbu replied. "The session starts in 10 minutes, he added before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto utilized the body flicker technique once more to vanish from in front of the compound to in front of the building where the Hokage's office was in. Putting an impassive expression on his face, Naruto entered the building, only giving a slight nod to people who greeted him along the way. As he entered the building, he stood in the main lobby and looked around, trying to find a stairway or something that leads to the basement. As he was standing in the lobby looking around, the same eagle-masked Umbu agent landed on the ground beside him. "Lord Senju," the Umbu said from beside Naruto. "This way, please," he said before he started walking towards a door located to the eastern side of the lobby. Following the Umbu agent, they walked through the door and down a flight of stairs into the basement of the building. The eagle-masked Umbu then led Naruto in front of two large, beautifully designed double doors and spoke. "This is the council chambers," he said in an impassive voice. "Everyone is already inside," he added. "Thank you, Eagle," Naruto said as he turned to the two double doors. The Umbu agent nodded before disappearing from beside Naruto. Taking a deep breath, Naruto pushed open both doors and stepped into the council chambers. As he stepped into the chambers, he saw there were three long conference tables arranged in a U shape with two of them laying vertical on either side of the chamber, while one laid horizontal at the head of the other two. There was a sizable gap between the two vertical tables where someone who was called before the council would stand. Seated at the table on the left were the shinobi council, most of whom were clan heads like Naruto, while on the table to the right sat the members of the civilian council. They were mostly rich merchants and business owners in the Leaf Village. Sitting at the horizontal table which connected the other two by himself was the Hokage. He was sitting in the center of the table in a large throne-like chair with a large red banner hanging from the wall directly behind him with the kanji for fire written on it. Behind the Hokage, sitting on either side of him, were his two advisors, who also happened to be his former teammates. They were sitting in front of two smaller desks not that far from the Hokage. "Welcome, Naruto," the Hokage greeted warmly, while making his pipe, knocking the blonde out of his examination. "I hope I'm not late," Naruto said after seeing he was clearly the last to arrive. "Not at all, my boy," the Hokage said with a wave of his hand. "You still have a few minutes to spare," he added, causing Naruto to nod his head before he started walking towards the shinobi side of the council, surprising the civilians along with the clan heads. The third Hokage just looked out with an amused expression on his face, not saying anything. As Naruto walked around the table, he observed everyone and everything and made mental notes in his head. The first thing he noticed was that behind the headrest of every chair was the crest for which clan they belonged to. Along with having their clan's crest engraved into the wood of their seat, they each had a metal nameplate directly in front of them on the desk with their names on it. The first person Naruto came upon was sitting at the very last seat at the table. It was someone he was somewhat similar with, and that was the Jonin sensei of Team 10, Asuma Sarutobi. Due to his father being Hokage, he had to take up the seat on the council. Naruto smiled slightly and nodded in the direction of the Jonin sensei of Team 10, to which he responded with a nod of his own. The immediate seat to the left of Asuma sat the only female member of the Shinobi Council, Tsume Inuzuka. She was the head of the Inuzuka clan. The Inuzuka clan were most famous for their use of ninja hounds as fighting companions and are easily identified by the distinctive red fang markings on their cheeks. Similar to how he greeted Asuma, Naruto gave a slight nod in the direction of the woman, to which she grinned back at him. Sitting next to Tsume was the head of the Adhering clan, Shibi Adhering. The Adhering clan was all famous for having insects residing inside of their bodies. The thing that Naruto found absolutely fascinating about the Adhering clan was the variety of ways the clan has found to utilize the insects in combat. The insects can be poisonous, used as trackers, they can consume your enemy's chakra, or even infest your enemy's body to kill them. The versatility of the insects was absolutely fascinating to Naruto. Naruto gave him a slight nod, just like he did the others, as he continued walking to his seat. The person sitting next to Shibi was the head of the Yamanaka clan, Inoichi Yamanaka. Along with being the head of the Yamanaka clan, he was also the head of the analysis team in the village's intelligence division, as well as 1/3 of the famous INO Shikacho formation. Naruto had heard that his family had a flower shop in the village. Maybe I should check out their shop to find some flowers to plant around the compound, he thought as he nodded and walked by the man. The next person he came across was another member of the INO Shikacho formation. It was the head of the Akimichi clan, Choza Akimichi. The Akimichi clan were famous for using techniques that revolve around the manipulation of their body weight and size through the use of yang release. Naruto had heard from his grandmother that it was an absolute taboo to call a member of the Akimichi clan fat. According to her, it is considered a death sentence. Similar to other clan heads he walked past, Naruto nodded and smiled at the man, to which he returned the gesture. Sitting next to Choza was a man who, simply judging from his appearance alone, Naruto could tell who he was and which clan he was the head of. That man was Hayashi Hyuga, the current head of the Hyuga clan. There was no mistaking the appearance of a member of the Hyuga clan. They all had long black hair and pale white eyes, along with always having an arrogant, conceited look on their faces. The Hyuga clan members were similar to the Uchiha. They all thought they were better than the rest because of their eyes. Looking at the man, Naruto could see the head of the Hyuga clan looked back at him with an impassive look on his face before he simply closed his eyes and turned away as if Naruto were not worth his time. The blonde-haired Senju simply kept an impassive look on his face and walked past the chair of the arrogant man without even bothering to acknowledging him. To the left of Hayashi was a man laying head down on the table with his eyes closed as though he was sleeping, which caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow. That man was none other than the final member of the INO Shikacho formation, Shikaku Nara, the head of the Nara clan and the Jonin commander of the Hidden Leaf Village. His position as the Jonin commander was why he was seated this far up the table. Sensing Naruto was walking past him, Shikaku opened one of his eyes and stared at the blonde for a few seconds before closing it back and muttering under his breath, "Troublesome," he muttered, causing Naruto to chuckle slightly as he walked past. Next to Shikaku was an empty chair with the symbol of the Uchiha clan on the back. There was no sitting head of the clan due to the fact that the only living members of the clan were Sasuke and his brother Itachi, and only one of them was still loyal to the leaf. Sasuke did not have the advantage that Naruto had by having his grandmother appoint him acting head of the clan. Before the massacre, the person next in line for the position of clan head was Itachi, but he was now a missing ninja and Sasuke is forced to wait until he becomes a Chunin. Sigh to himself while shaking his head, Naruto walked past the empty chair to the next seat, which was the seat of the Senju clan. As he got there, however, he narrowed his eyes dangerously as he stared at a frail old man with bandages covering the right side of his face sitting in the seat. "Excuse me, but I do believe you are in my seat," Naruto said in a cold voice as he stared down at the old man. "Unless there is another Senju in the village I am unaware of," he added. The room was dead silent. No one uttered a word. They all simply watch on to see how the situation would play out. "I am the proxy in the council for the Senju clan," the old man replied proudly. "I don't recall my grandmother mentioning anything about her appointing a proxy to vote on behalf of the clan," Naruto stated as he continued to stare at the man who had yet to even look in his direction. "Tobirama Senju was my teacher, and besides, the council is no place for a brat like you," the man said in a slightly irritated tone. "I could care less as to who your teacher was," Naruto stated in a cold voice as he was starting to get angry. "You do not have Senju blood flowing through your veins, so you hold no authority to vote on behalf of the Senju clan," he told the old man. "So, I am going to have to ask you to vacate the seat," he said in an unfriendly tone. "And if I refuse to get up?" the old man asked as he turned and looked at Naruto with one eye, causing the blonde to narrow his eyes before he spoke in a threatening tone. "Then I'll just have to use force," Naruto said lowly before releasing the might of his chakra. Dense chakra exploded from Naruto, causing the ground beneath his feet to break under the pressure and the cracks to form on the four walls of the council chambers. The chakra was so dense that it became visible in a green outline around Naruto, causing everyone's eyes in the room to be as wide as dinner plates. The shockwave from Naruto releasing his chakra knocked all the civilians off their chairs while causing the clan heads to sweat slightly. Shikaku Nara was now wide awake, staring at Naruto with a shocked expression on his face, which was mirrored by all the other clan heads. Even the Hokage was surprised by Naruto's power. He had known the blonde was powerful, but he had no idea he was already this powerful. "His chakra is so dense," the clan heads all thought as they were slightly struggling under the pressure Naruto was exerting. The Hokage, his two advisors, and the old man currently sitting in the Senju clan's seat all had different thoughts. However, "It's like Lord Hashirama's chakra," they all thought as the strong dense chakra reminded them of the first Hokage. While everyone was having their own thoughts, Naruto continued to stare at the old man before taking one step in his direction. As his foot made that one step, even more chakra exploded out from Naruto, surprising everyone once more. The old man widens his eyes slightly before a tremendous amount of pain struck his right arm, which was hidden away in his robe. "HHHH!" the old man screamed while clutching his right arm, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in confusion for a split second. Before anyone could question what was happening to the old man, two Umbu agents wearing coats dropped down behind Naruto with their swords drawn. and stabbed it through Naruto's chest, causing all the clan heads to spring to their feet along with the Hokage. Looking down at his chest and seeing two short swords sticking out of him, Naruto kept an impassive look on his face before slowly turning his head to the side and staring at his two attackers with a cold expression on his face. "It takes more than that to kill me," he said calmly, surprising the two Umbu members. Before they could react, Naruto spun around and grabbed both of their heads in each of his hands. With a tight grip on both of their heads, Naruto slammed both of their head into the wall behind them with such force it shook the entire building and crushed the two Umbu's head in the process to the point where blood and brain matter splattered on the wall, killing them. The two now headless corpses dropped to the ground before Naruto removed his bloodied hand from the wall and turned back around to face everyone. He then reaches up behind him with both hands and grabbed the two swords which were still stuck in his chest and pulled them out before dropping them beside the two corpses. Everyone's eyes widen at how nonchalant Naruto was about what should be a fatal wound. Through the rips in his shirt, everyone could see the wounds healing themselves at a rapid pace, surprising them even more. "I am not going to tell you to get up again, old man," Naruto said dangerously as he began walking in the direction of the old man with his chakra still flaring. The old man stared at Naruto with one eye while clutching his right hand in pain. "I did not think he was this powerful," the old man thought as he tries to battle through the pain. "Danzo?" Naruto was appointed acting head of the Senju clan by Tsunade until she returns, the Hokage said, deciding to speak up before things get more out of hand. At first, he had thought this would all be very amusing to see how Naruto handles Danzo, but he never imagined it would turn out like this. Growling to himself, the old man now named Danzo got up and walked over in the direction of the two elders. "And you and I are going to have words about that little organization that you were supposed to disband," the Hokage added strongly. Naruto then got his chakra under control and the once unimaginable pressure vanished from the room, causing everyone to relax. As his chakra was back under control, Naruto noticed the pain in Danzo's right arm seemed to vanish as well. "Interesting," he thought as he stared at the now pain-free old man before making him over and sitting down at the council table in the seat for the Senju clan. "Umbu, get rid of those bodies," the Hokage ordered before sitting back down as two Umbu agents dropped down and took the bodies away. Everyone in the council soon retook their seats and stared at Naruto in awe. "How are you not dead?" One civilian council member blurted out the question that was on everyone's mind. "According to my grandmother, her grandfather possessed a considerable regenerative ability that rivaled if not surpassed those of Jinchurikis," he said as he looked at the two rips in his shirts. "I seem to also have this ability," he added with a grin, surprising the Hokage and his advisors along with everyone else inside the council. "Ah man, I really like this shirt," Naruto complained as he rubbed his fingers across the two rips. "Ha ha ha, I like this kid," Sum suddenly said while laughing. "He's going to make these meetings fun," she added, causing Naruto to grin and give her two thumbs up before replying. "Ha ha ha, you can count on me," he said with a wide grin. "Troublesome," Shikaku said before laying his head back down on the desk. "Let's get this meeting started," the Hokage said with a sigh before taking a long drag from his pipe and blew out a large billow of smoke before he reached into his robe and pulled out a small storage scroll and tossed it up into the air before activating the storage seal, causing a puff of smoke to surround the scroll before a set of papers fell down in front of each council members. Everyone then sat at attention with a serious look on their faces as they looked through the papers, except for Shikaku, who still had his head on the desk. "You are the one who summoned the council, Lord Hokage," the head of the civilian council said. The head of the civilian side of the council was a woman named Mabuki Haruno. Along with being the head of the civilian council, she is Sakura's mother. She got to her position on the council due to her and her husband owning a few buildings in the commercial district which they rent out to business owners. "What was the reason for today's summons?" she asked respectfully. "Well, in about 5 months' time, the Chunin exams will be held here in the Hidden Leaf Village," the third Hokage informed, causing the civilian side of the council to perk up a bit. "So, we need to start making preparations," he added. "The Chunin exams are always great for business," a merchant from the civilian side said while the other nodded in agreement. "Have you decided who the head proctors are going to be?" Inoichi asked as he turned and looked at the Hokage. "No, not as yet," the old man said before turning his attention to Shikaku. Shikaku and I will meet later and decide on that, he said, causing the Nara clan head to groan. Inoichi, start making preparations in the barrier and sensory division to handle the heavy influx of people, the Hokage said as he turned to the Yamanaka clan's head. Yes, Lord Third, the blonde-haired man replied with a nod. Is the arena in order? Choza asked as he read the papers. Some minor repairs need to be made to some seats and rails, but nothing major, one of the Hokage's advisors said from behind the Hokage. What is the maximum capacity of spectators the arena can hold? Naruto suddenly asked while reading the papers. 25,000, replied the old woman sitting behind the Hokage. Why? She asked. You are going to need more seats, Naruto stated, puzzling everyone. Why is that, Lord Senju? A civilian asked, causing Naruto to look up from the papers. Well, this year the last Uchiha will be competing. A lot of people are going to come to see that, he said, causing everyone to nod, understanding his logic. But also, by that time, the news would have reached all the other villages if it has not already of a Senju possessing the first Hokage's bloodline appeared in the Leaf Village and will be competing in this year's Chunin exams, he added with a smirk. People are going to come from far and wide to see that, he said with a chuckle, causing everyone to realize why he suggested the need for more seats. He is right, Shikaku said in a lethargic tone as he raised his head up. The fact that the last two male heirs to the founding clans of the village are going to be competing, plus the fact that both heirs passing two incredibly strong bloodlines, with one of them not being seen by the world for a few decades now. People are going to want to see these legendary powers with their own eyes, he said in a serious voice as he leaned back in his chair. Not to mention the villages that are going to show up in order to see if either two is a possible threat to them, he added, causing everyone to become even more serious. Either way, the entire situation is troublesome, he said with a yawn, causing everyone to sweat drop. Sounds exciting, Naruto said with an excited look on his face, causing the Hokage to chuckle and shake his head. Even if we decide to increase the spectator capacity of the arena, will it be done in time for the exams? Tsum asked a valid question, causing everyone to ponder upon it. I would say so, Naruto said with a thoughtful expression on his face. If we hire the bridge builder Tsunade from the Land of Waves, he could possibly do it, he suggested. In 5 months' time? Shibi asked in a skeptical tone. Yeah, I mean, he built an impressive bridge connecting the Land of Waves and the Land of Fire in about 3 to 4 months, Naruto said while nodding. This should be easier than a bridge, he added with a chuckle. Plus, he should give us a discount after he saved his country and whatnot, Naruto said while looking at the Hokage. Saved his country? Hayashi asked, speaking for the first time. Long story short, a C-rank mission turned into an A-rank mission due to the involvement of a few missing ninjas. We killed the missing ninjas and the guy who hired said ninjas, freeing the Land of Waves from oppression, Naruto summarized, causing everyone's mouth to hang open. How does a C-rank mission become an A-rank mission? Choza asked with a bewildered expression on his face. What kind of twisted luck if that? He asked, causing the Hokage to chuckle while Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders. Which reminds me, Naruto said as he narrowed his eyes and turned to the third Hokage. We are going to need an explanation as to why Team 7 was given a C-rank mission in the first place only after being genin for 1 week, he said, causing the Shinobi Council to narrow their eyes while a few civilian council members began to squirm slightly. An investigation is currently being conducted, the Hokage informed. Once it is completed, another council session will be held to go over the results, he said, causing Naruto to nod along with the Shinobi Council. Now, are there any objections to the upgrades to the stadium? He asked as he looked around. No one voiced any concerns, so the Hokage made a note on his set of papers. If we are going to have the new spectator stands built, I can add some barrier seals around the arena, that way the spectators are not affected by anything going on during a match, Naruto said, surprising the shinobi once more. You know how to make seals? Hayashi asked with a surprised look on his face, to which Naruto simply nodded. I guess you could say I am a seals master, he said, trying to be modest. That is a great idea, Naruto, the Hokage said with a smile. Spectator safety was always an issue we had to worry about. If you can make these barriers around the stadium to protect them, then that would be appreciated, he said as he stared at the blonde. Danzo, who was standing behind the two advisors, clenched his cane in his left hand and narrowed his eyes at Naruto. He is too young to be this powerful already, the old war hawk thought to himself as he stared at Naruto. In the brief time he has been in the council, he is already winning over the favor of the shinobi council and even some of the civilians, he thought angrily. He must be eliminated before he becomes more powerful or gains more influence, he thought as he began to scheme in his head. Unaware of the thoughts of the old war hawk, the rest of the council meeting continued discussing the plans and budget for the upcoming Chunin exams. Naruto had suggested a lot of ideas to the council, a lot of which both sides liked and found interesting. For his first council meeting, Naruto was doing an excellent job of gaining influence with both sides of the council. The third Hokage had to admit he was quite impressed. After 2 hours of planning everything out, the council session finally came to an end. Okay, that is it for this session, the Hokage said, calling the session to a halt. You're all dismissed. Except for you, Danzo, he said, causing everyone to look off behind him at the old man who had been standing the entire time. As everyone was exiting the chamber, they could all hear the Hokage yelled to Danzo. I thought I told you to disband that little organization 6 years ago. They all heard the Hokage yell as they exited the chamber before the door shut behind them. 6 years ago? Naruto thought to himself, thinking back to what notable events happened 6 years ago. His grandmother had talked about Danzo and his organization, the Root. Even though they engaged in some shady dealings, the Hokage still kept them around. It would have to be something big that happened 6 years ago that would push the third Hokage to force Danzo to disband his organization. The only notable event that happened 6 years ago was the Uchiha massacre, he thought with a puzzled expression on his face as he walked up the stairs back to the main lobby. Did Danzo play a part in the Uchiha massacre? He asked himself before shaking the thoughts from his head as he realized he reached the main lobby. Holding up the half-ram seal, Naruto disappeared from the lobby in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves and reappearing back in the private training grounds of the Senju compound. When he arrived, he saw his clones were all still hard at work training. Summoning his own wooden pillar, he joined in the training with them. 2 days later, after 2 days off, Naruto was currently standing in the training ground 11 waiting for his sensei so they could get back to work. His 2 days of training had been extremely productive. He had managed to increase his affinity to both water and earth chakra natures. His knowledge in seals had increased as well after his clones had practiced quite a bit over the past 2 days. Even though he had not used the 2 days to exactly rest, he was feeling incredibly refreshed. You look ready to go, came the voice of Yamato from behind Naruto, surprising the blonde. He was so engrossed in thought that he had not sensed the man appearing in the training ground. You bet, Naruto said as he gave his sensei a thumbs up. Well then, let's go get a mission to start the day, Yamato said before the two of them disappeared from the training in their own unique version of the body flicker technique. Chapter 10. Flowers and Team 10. It had been a week since the council meeting. Naruto and his sensei had picked up right where they left off with the D-rank missions, much to the delight of the villagers. Yamato felt that returning to doing D-rank missions for a while was a much-needed reset after the events of their previous C-rank mission. Naruto didn't mind this course of action one bit, as it allowed him to take in the sights of the village and meet the villagers. Spending all his life in the capital with his grandmother and big sister, he hadn't had much interaction with people outside of those two and his godfather when he stopped by for a visit. As such, he thoroughly enjoys conversing with the villagers during his missions. Currently, Naruto was walking through the streets of the Leaf Village. He had the day off due to his sensei being called away on a mission. His sensei had told him that it would mean he would be taking missions with one of the other genin teams while he was away. Naruto did not know which team he would be teaming up with. He figured he would just find out in the morning when he reported for his mission assignment. Good morning, Lord Senju, came a female voice knocking Naruto out of his thoughts. Looking in the direction from which the voice originated from, Naruto saw an elderly woman smiling at him warmly. Good morning, Naruto politely said with a warm smile of his own before he continued walking along his way. As he walked through the street, more and more villagers would greet him, and he would in turn smile and reciprocate each of their greetings. After walking for another 15 minutes, Naruto arrived at his destination. Looking up at the sign, he saw it read Yamanaka Flowers. It was a flower shop that was run by the Yamanaka clan. The shop had been in business since the first Hokage's era. Smiling at himself, Naruto walked up and pulled the door open, causing the tiny bell hung above the door to chime, alerting the owners that they had a customer. The gentle scent of blooming lilies and fresh soil washed over him the moment he stepped inside. "Good morning. Welcome to Yamanaka Flowers," came the soft voice of the woman sitting behind the counter off to the left of the entrance. Naruto looked over at her and smiled, causing her to let out a small gasp as she recognized who he was. "Lord Senju," she said in shock as he bowed slightly. She had light brown eyes without pupils and brown hair, which was tied into a bun with a red ribbon in it. Strands framed both sides of her face, hanging over her ears from behind them. She was fair-skinned, and slight wrinkles were visible near her mouth. Her attire consists of a dark teal, elegant dress, which sports an aquamarine-colored gem below the collar. "Please, call me Naruto," he said, trying to get her to drop the formalities. "Well, it is a pleasure to meet you, Naruto," she said warmly as she smiled at the blonde. "I'm Aoi Yamanaka. You are probably familiar with my daughter INO. She is also a genin like you," she said in an elegant tone. Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise, not realizing that the woman before him was the matriarch of the Yamanaka clan. "And my husband, Inoichi, the current head of the Yamanaka clan," she added, causing Naruto to nod his head in confirmation. "I have met both of them, though briefly," he said gracefully. "Now," Aoi said as she stepped out from behind the counter. "What brings you here today?" she asked with a smile as she approached the blonde. "I'm here looking to buy some flowers," he said as he looked around the shop. His eyes scanned the vibrant display of blooms lining the walls, sunflowers stretching toward the ceiling, delicate orchids basking in the sunlight pouring through the front windows, and neat rows of fresh-cut arrangements that looked too perfect to touch. For a second, he just stood there, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere. "Are you looking for flowers for a particular occasion?" she questioned, knocking him out of his observation. "It's not for any particular occasion," Naruto replied as he turned and looked at her once more. "I am trying to breathe some life back into the Senju clan's compound," he said, letting out a sigh. "My grandmother always told me about how beautiful the compound was when all the flowers were in bloom. But with no one living in the compound for the past decade, all the flowers that were there withered away," he said, causing Aoi to nod, understanding his goal. She was about to say something to him, but before she could, the sound of the bell above the door chiming got both of their attention. Turning his head to the side and glancing behind him, Naruto saw the heir of the Yamanaka clan walk through the door. INO had her hands full with a large arrangement of flowers. Glancing down at her feet, Naruto saw that she used chakra on the bottom of her feet to pull the door open for herself. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at himself when he noticed that. "Clever girl," he thought with a chuckle. "Mom!" INO shouted, not realizing her mother was standing right in front of her due to the flowers blocking her view. "I brought the arrangement that Sakura's mom ordered," she shouted out before placing the flowers down on the counter. "No need to shout, dear," her mom replied elegantly, causing INO to look over in her direction and see both her and Naruto smiling at her. "Naruto?" INO yelled out in surprise, causing her mom to shake her head, while Naruto just grinned at her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, tilting her head to one side. Naruto smirked and leaned against the counter before replying to her. "Well, I'm here to see you, of course," he said with a smirk, causing a light blush to appear on INO's face and her eyes to go wide. Really?" she asked with a small stutter as she felt her heart rate increase slightly. "No," Naruto replied, chuckling to himself before turning back to Aoi. INO's eyebrow twitched in frustration before she punched Naruto in the arm. "Idiot," she said as she punched him. "Ow!" Naruto yelped. "That hurt," he said, rubbing his arm where she punched him. INO simply folded her arms and huffed at him before walking to stand beside her mother with a small pout on her face. Aoi couldn't stop herself from giggling at the interaction between the two in front of her. "Now, dear," Aoi began to playfully scold her daughter. Naruto is a customer, she said, causing Ino to huff at him once more, earning a chuckle from her fellow blonde. Turning her attention back to the young Senju heir, Aoi spoke once more. Though I must say, Naruto, she began, getting his attention. Bringing the Senju compound back to life is something we can help with, she said with a nod. Like you, I too have heard the stories of the beauty of your clan's compound from my mother-in-law, she said with a warm smile on her face as she recalled a memory. Grandma told you? Ino suddenly asked her mom as she looked at her questioningly. Yes, she said, nodding her head. Your grandparents had made frequent deliveries to the Senju compound when they ran the shop, she said, surprising Ino while making Naruto smile. Do you know what kind of flowers you would like, Naruto? She asked, causing the blonde to shake his head. No, he said with a sigh. I am not sure what would look good around the compound, he admitted with a light chuckle. Would you like it if one of us came to the compound with you and took a look? She asked, causing the blonde to perk up at that suggestion. I would appreciate that, he said eagerly. If it's not too much trouble, that is, he added with a sheepish look on his face, causing her older woman to chuckle lightly at him. No trouble at all, she said before putting her arm around her daughter. Ino had the entire day free today, so she can go with you, she said, causing her daughter's face to take on a surprised look. But Mom, Ino began before her mom gave her a stern look, squashing any complaints she was about to have. Don't worry, Naruto, Aoi said, returning the warm smile to her face. When it comes to flower arrangements and decorating, Ino has a good eye, she said, causing a light blush to appear on her daughter's face at the praise. Well, in that case, I'll be in your capable hands, Naruto said, flashing Ino with a smile, causing her light blush to deepen. She quickly turned away from the blonde and made her way to the back room of the shop. Let me grab my notebook and pen, she said with a small stutter, causing her mom to giggle once more. A few moments later, she came out of the back room with a purple satchel strapped across her body. Let's get going, she said, grabbing Naruto's arm, pulling him out of the shop. It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Yamanaka, Naruto yelled out as Ino dragged him outside. Once outside, she let go of his arm and the two of them began making their way to the clan's compound. The blonde duo walked in silence for about 5 minutes before Ino spoke up. How do you handle all of it? She asked, causing Naruto to look at her with a confused look on her face. He mumbled, tilting his head to one side with a confused look on his face. Handle what? He asked. All the stairs, she replied lowly while gesturing at the people staring at them as they walked through the street. Looking away from her, Naruto saw the villagers all looking at them as they walked by. I guess I've grown accustomed to it, he said as he waved to a few people who greeted him when they noticed he was looking at them. Ino simply shook her head. As much as she enjoyed having people's attention, this was just too much attention even for her. Seeing that his fellow blonde was uncomfortable under all the stares, Naruto decided to change the topic to get her mind thinking about something else. How come you are not with your team doing missions? He asked. We have the day off today, she said, folding her arms as she walked. And those are not missions, those are chores, she said with a huff, causing Naruto to chuckle. And don't get me started on those two idiots I have as teammates, she began, much to Naturo's amusement. One can't stop eating and the other can't stay awake, he said, causing Naruto to let out a chuckle. Sounds like one interesting team dynamic, he said with a smile. While I'm stuck with those two, Forehead Girl is getting closer and closer to Sasuke every day, she said, clenching her fist out in front of her, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at her. Forehead Girl? He asked questioningly. Sakura, Ino replied, causing him to nod his head in understanding. Should have been me on his team, she said in frustration. Speaking of Sakura, Naruto began, putting his hands in his pockets as they walked. What's her deal? He asked, getting a questioning look from Ino in response. What do you mean? She asked in a confused tone. Is chasing after Sasuke her only motivation? He asked as he waved at a villager who greeted him. Does she have any aspirations whatsoever in being a kunoichi? He asked as it had been a question he was genuinely curious about ever since meeting the girl on the mission to protect the bridge builder. INO was silent for a few minutes before she finally responded. I don't know, she admitted in a softer tone. We never talked about it, she said, looking down as they walked. We used to be good friends, but when she found out I had a crush on Sasuke, she said we wouldn't be friends anymore, she said, surprising Naruto. That's a pretty stupid reason to end a friendship, Naruto said bluntly. We were kids at the time, she said with a smile. Besides, being rivals seems to push her along, she said, causing Naruto to smile. To him, it sounded like INO didn't like Sasuke as much as she let on. She was only doing it to push her friend along. You're a good friend, INO, Naruto said, causing her to blush. Shut up, she said quietly, causing him to chuckle. We're here, he said, stopping in front of the gates to the compound, surprising INO. She was so absorbed in their conversation that she hadn't realized that they were already in the clan district. Using the master control on the sealing matrix, Naruto undid the security seals and escorted INO into the compound before reactivating them. As they walked down the main path of the compound, INO couldn't help but marvel at the cherry blossom trees lining the pathway on either side. What do you think about some flow patches between the cherry blossoms on either side of the pathway? She asked as he pulled out her notebook and pen from her satchel and began making notes and taking sketches. Oh, that would look lovely, Naruto replied as he began to picture it in his head. We would alternate colors between each tree, he added, causing INO to nod. I think some peonies would be a great fit there, she said before walking up and kneeling between two cherry blossoms, then began to poke the soil with the back of her pen. Soil is nice and loose as well, she commented before standing back up and adding to her notes. The duo continued walking until they arrived at the main courtyard of the compound. In the center of the plaza was a large concrete box set on an inclined plane and filled with nothing but soil. The pathway formed a perfect circle around the box and then branched out in many directions from the center. It's a flower bed, Naruto said, answering the question he knew INO was asking herself. From the stories I heard from my grandmother, our clan symbol was displayed there, using flowers to shape it, he said while pointing to the symbol on the back of his shirt. I would like it to be on display again, he added, looking at INO, who was making more notes. Any colors in particular you would like? She asked as she looked up at him. A white background with the clan symbol itself being red, he said with a nod. INO tapped her pen against her chin a few times while thinking about the possible flowers that could be used for Naruto's request. White chrysanthemums and some red camellias should do the trick, she said with a nod before jotting it down in her notebook and looking at the area surrounding the box. We can add some moss flocks on the ground around the box. It's a carpet-like flowering plant, great for visual cohesion, she said, looking at Naruto for approval. I trust your judgment, he said with a smile and a nod. The duo then spent the next hour reviewing every aspect of the compound, where they thought flowers would be a good addition. When they were all done, INO had quite a few pages filled with notes and sketches. I think this should do, she said, flipping through the pages. I agree, Naruto said with a nod. Should we head back to the shop? He asked, causing INO to nod and put the notebook back into her satchel. Sure, let's go, she said before two of them began making their way out to the compound. Want to walk or run? Naruto asked, glancing up at the rooftops. I'm fine with running, INO said before channeling chakra into her legs. Leaping from the ground into a nearby rooftop, Naruto smirked to himself before following suit. He quickly caught up with his fellow blonde. He made sure to slow his own pace down to match hers as they leaped from one rooftop to the next on their way back to the flower shop. It took less than 5 minutes for them to arrive back at the flow shop. Dropping down in front of the shop, Naruto stepped forward and pulled the door open, causing the bell above the door to chime. Ladies first, he said, gesturing for INO to enter with a smile. My, such a gentleman, INO teased as she walked through the door, causing Naruto to chuckle. Mom, we're back, she called out as they entered the shop. I'm in the greenhouse, dear, Aoi called out from further inside the ship. INO looked back at Naruto and gestured for him to follow her. Nodding back at her, he followed her through the back room and out a door which led to the family's greenhouse. As he stepped into the greenhouse, he felt the temperature rise slightly, the air warm and humid, heavy with the mingled aromas of soil, petals, and the faint, almost medicinal tang of herbs. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof in golden beams, casting soft, dappled patterns over the foliage. The greenhouse was a living maze of green. Tall stalks of lavender swayed in the breeze of a small fan, vines curled around trellises, and rows of potted plants lined the back tables with the kind of meticulous care only a florist would have. "Welcome back," Aoi said, getting Naruto's attention. She was standing by one of the tables at the back, tending to some of the potted plants, which Naruto could see were all bent over. "I got everything we would need, Mom," INO said as Naruto and she made their way to the back of the greenhouse where her mother was. "But I am going to need your help to figure out how many flowers we will need," she added, causing her mom to nod and smile at the duo. "That's fine, dear," she replied before turning her attention back to the potted plant. "What happened to the orchids?" INO asked in a slightly worried voice. "I don't know, dear," Aoi replied in a somber tone. "I came back here to check up on them and saw all of them bent over like this with their blooms closed," she said as she placed her hand under one of the flowers. "Aren't these supposed to be picked up today?" INO asked, looking at her mom. "Yes," she replied, letting out a sigh. "I suppose I will have to reduce the price since they are like this," she added with a frown. "I can help if you like," Naruto said, getting both women's attention. They both looked at him with a confused look on their faces. "How can you help?" INO asked, genuinely confused at what the blonde thought he could do. "Like this?" Naruto said with a smirk, letting his chakra begin to flow. The effect was immediate. All around him, the greenhouse responded, not just visually, but viscerally. Flowers unfurled in full bloom, their colors deepening into richer, more vibrant hues. Leaves shimmered with new luster, their edges lifting as if awakened from slumber. Even the stems and stalks straightened with sudden vigor, as though the plants were reaching toward Naruto himself, drawn in by his life force. Aoi and INO stood frozen, mouths slightly ajar, unable to tear their eyes from the transformation unfolding before them. It wasn't just something they saw, it was something they felt. The air grew warmer, denser, alive with energy that hummed through the soil and clung to the walls like a living aura. The greenhouse didn't just look livelier, felt sacred. Then, just as gently as it had started, Naruto let his chakra recede. "Amazing," Aoi said in a whisper while her daughter could only nod. "It is just like the story about Lord First," she added as she noted the orchids now in full bloom. "Thank you, Naruto," Aoi said gratefully with a small bow. "It's no problem at all," Naruto said with a wide smile. "Do you know when you know how many flowers it will be for the compound?" he asked, wanting to change the topic. "I will have to sit down and go over INO's notes with her before I make that decision," she said before she paused and thought about it for a while. "It may take a couple of days, as I think it would be best to get my husband's input on it as well," she said, causing Naruto to nod in understanding. "If you like, I can have INO come find you once we have everything finalized. Then Nu can determine a price," she added with a smile. "That sounds good to me," Naruto replied with a nod. "Well, I'd better get going. I want to get some training in," he said with a smile. "Thank you both for your help today," he said, bowing slightly to the two of them. No, thank you," Aoi responded with a grateful smile to the blonde. Naruto then turned to INO, who still had her mouth open while staring at him with an amazed look on her face and smirked at her. "I guess I'll be seeing you around, INO," he said with a smirk before holding up a half-ram seal. INO could only nod dumbly as she watched the blonde disappear from the greenhouse in the swirl of cherry blossoms. "Close your mouth, dear, you'll catch flies," her mom said with a giggle before she returned to tending to the orchids. At the Senju compound ***, Naruto appeared in front of the main house of the compound, the same way he disappeared from the Yamanaka flower shop, in a swirl of cherry blossoms. Naruto then created 300 shadow clones. He ordered 100 clones to continue their work with the sealing techniques they found in the clan's library, and the remaining 200 were ordered to go practice some new would-release jutsus from his great-great-grandfather's scrolls. While the clones were off with their respective training, Naruto made his way to the private hot springs. He planned on spending the rest of the day relaxing. Next day, Naruto was currently standing in his room, fully dressed in his gear. He looked over himself in the mirror before strapping his headband to his left bicep. He did a once-over of all his equipment before he held up a half-ram seal and disappeared using the body flicker technique. Naruto reappeared in front of the gates of the academy in a swirl of cherry blossoms, much to the surprise of the academy students arriving at school this morning. "Whoa, look at that," one student said in shock. "That's so cool," another said as they watched Naruto appear. "I want to learn how to do that," another said. Naruto ignored all the stares and began making his way into the academy. As he was making his way to the academy, he heard a familiar voice call out to him. "Big bro Naruto," came the voice of Konohamaru from behind Naruto. Stopping and turning around, Naruto saw Konohamaru running towards him with two other kids his age. "Hey, Konohamaru," Naruto said, greeting the boy as he stopped in front of him. "Who are your friends?" he asked, looking at the two kids with Konohamaru. "This is Udon," he said while pointing to the boy with snot running from his nose. "And this is Moegi," he added, pointing to the lone female of the group. "We saw you just appear from out of nowhere. It was so cool," Konohamaru said as he and his friends stared up at Naruto with stars in their eyes. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at their reactions. "Can you teach us how to do that?" Konohamaru asked as he and his friends all leaned closer to Naruto with a hopeful look in their eyes. "How about you guys graduating from the academy first? Then I'll teach you," Naruto said with a chuckle as he ruffled the boy's hair before turning and entering the academy. "You promise?" Konohamaru asked as he and his friends followed Naruto into the academy. "I promise," Naruto replied with another chuckle, causing the kids to get excited. "Are you here for a mission, Naruto?" Moegi asked as they walked through the halls of the academy. "Yeah, hopefully I get something good today," he replied with a nod. "Have you been on any cool missions yet, Naruto?" Udon asked, causing the other two to look at Naruto with excited looks on their faces. Naruto brought his hand up to his chin and tapped his finger against it a few times as if he were thinking. You could say I've been on a few," Naruto said with a smirk as he bragged a little. "Took care of some bandits near Tenzaku quarters a couple of weeks ago," he said nonchalantly, causing the kids' eyes to light up. "Then I had to protect a bridge builder in the Land of Waves from a missing ninja called the Demon of the Hidden Mist," he added while sneaking a glance at the kids. "Wow, wow," all three of the kids said in unison, causing Naruto to grin. "That's so cool, big bro," Konohamaru said with stars in his eyes. "Yeah, you're like the coolest," added Udon. "I can't wait for us to graduate and go on cool missions," Moegi said with an excited look on her face. "Well, the only way you three are going to graduate is if you get to class," Naruto said as he arrived at the stairs leading to the upper floor where the mission assignment center was. "Bye, Naruto," the three said in unison before running off to their class. Naruto shook his head and chuckled to himself before he made his way up the stairs to the mission assignment center. Naruto slid the door open and entered the room. "Good morning," he greeted as he entered. Currently inside the room was the Hokage, sitting in his usual spot smoking his pipe, and two chunins that Naruto had never seen before. "Good morning, Naruto," the Hokage greeted as he took a puff from his pipe. "You're early," he said, causing Naruto to chuckle sheepishly as he walked up to the long desk. "Just figured I'd get a head start today," Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head with a casual grin. The third Hokage chuckled warmly, his eyes crinkling with amusement at the young Senju's familiar energy. He opened his mouth to respond, but the soft HHK of the mission room door sliding open drew both their attention. Stepping through was Team 10, their sensei leading the way. Naruto recognized him immediately from the council meeting. Asuma Sarutobi, the Hokage's son, with a cigarette tucked between his fingers and an easy confidence in his stride. Trailing behind him was INO, her blonde hair catching the morning light. Naruto offered her a bright smile. INO blinked in surprise, then straightened slightly as a faint smile tugged at her lips. Next came Shikamaru Nara, dragging his feet with the half-lidded expression of someone who resented being awake before noon. And finally, Choji Akimichi strolled in, cheerfully munching on a bag of chips, crumbs dusting the corners of his mouth. The sound of crunching echoed in the otherwise quiet room. Naruto watched the trio with mild amusement, a soft chuckle escaping him. Their personalities couldn't have been more different, but somehow it worked. There was something oddly balanced about them. Team 10 reporting for duty, Asuma said as he walked up to the desk, giving Naruto a small nod in acknowledgement, to which Naruto returned. INO immediately walked over and stood beside Naruto on the left. You two know each other? Asuma asked while looking at the blonde duo. I'm buying some flowers from their shop for the clan's compound, Naruto said, turning his attention to the jonin. INO helped me pick out the flowers that I will need, he added as he took a small glance at the blonde at his side. It's been years since I've seen flowers in the Senju clan's compound, the third Hokage said as he closed his eyes, recalling a fond memory. After hearing all the stories about the compound from Grandma, I wanted to breathe some of that life back into the compound, Naruto said, causing the old Hokage to smile at him fondly. Well, I look forward to seeing it once it is done, he said, causing Naruto to nod his head. Well then, shall we get to? The Hokage began before he was cut off by the door opening once more. Turning his head to the side, Naruto saw that Team 8 were the ones entering the room this time. Leading the way was Kurenai Yuhi, her crimson eyes sharp yet serene, scanning the room with quiet confidence. Her long black hair flowed behind her like a shadow, and there was a poise to her step that commanded silent respect. Naruto watched as the first of her students stepped in, Hinata Hyuga. She moved cautiously, her gaze low, giving Naruto the impression that she was very timid. Next came Shino Aburame, silent and composed, his high-collared jacket and dark glasses giving away nothing of his thoughts. Naruto gave the bug user a respectful nod, which Shino returned with the barest tilt of his head. Bringing up the rear was Kiba Inuzuka, as energetic as ever. Akamaru perched comfortably on his head, yipping a short bark as they entered. The moment Kiba's eyes landed on Naruto, he tried to size the blonde up. Naruto simply ignored him. Morning, Kurenai, Asuma said with a smirk and his cigarette in his mouth as Team 8 walked up to join the group. Good morning, Asuma, Kurenai said as she shot Naruto a glance. Still smoking that cancer stick I see, she added as she looked past her fellow jonin and bowed to the Hokage. Must you wound me so every time? Asuma asked in a mock-hurt tone, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at the two. I haven't been wounding you enough, it seems, Kurenai retorted, causing the Hokage to chuckle slightly. Naruto glanced over at INO and whispered, Do they like each other or something? He asked in a whisper but was still loud enough for everyone in the room to hear the question. Kurenai and Asuma looked away from each other in embarrassment, with a small blush appearing on the female jonin's face. INO punched Naruto in the side of the arm for his failed attempt at a whisper. Can we get on with the day's events now? The Hokage asked, getting everyone's attention. We have a large stack of missions here that need to be completed, he said, gesturing to the stack of scrolls with the letter D labeled on them, earning groans from every genin present except Naruto. Actually, Lord Hokage, Asuma spoke up, causing everyone to look at him. I think my team is ready to try their first C-rank mission, he said, surprising his team, who were earning jealous looks from a certain Inuzuka clan heir. Are you sure? The third Hokage asked as he studied his son's expression. Yes, I do, Asuma responded confidently. Very well, Lord Third responded before grabbing a scroll with the letter C on it, tossing it to the jonin. He then pulled another scroll and tossed it to him before speaking once more. Your mission will be to deliver that scroll to the Kazekage in the village hidden in the sand, he said, surprising to Jonins and Naruto. It is applications for this year's Chunin exams, he said, earning a nod from Asuma. All of our messenger hawks are out delivering to the villages further away. So, your team will be making this delivery, he added before turning to Naruto. Since your sensei is out on a separate mission, you will be joining Team 10 on their mission, Naruto, the third Hokage said, causing the blonde to smile and nod. Welcome aboard, Naruto, Choji said with a mouth full of chips, causing Naruto to flash him a grin and a thumbs up. How troublesome, Shikamaru said with a yawn. I feel my team also ready for a C-rank mission, Kurenai said, grabbing everyone's attention. They have completed the required number of D-rank missions, she added, causing the lone Inuzuka on her team to become slightly excited at the prospect of a C-rank mission. Very well, the Hokage replied before grabbing another scroll with the letter C on it, along with another scroll with no markings. He then tossed both scrolls to the female Jonin before he spoke again. Your team's mission will be to travel to the Land of Waves and meet with the master bridge builder, Tsunade, the Hokage said, getting Naruto's attention. The contents of that scroll are a request for him to come make repairs and additions to the stadium, he added, earning a nod from the female Jonin. Should he accept, you will then escort him and his workers back to the village safely, he said sternly. Yes, Lord Hokage, Kurenai said with a bow before turning to her team. Go home and prep to be out of the village for more than a week and meet me at the south gate in 1 hour, she said to her genin team. The three of them nodded before rushing out of the mission assignment room to get ready, with Kurenai following behind after bidding the remaining occupants of the room farewell. It was now Asuma's turn to speak to his team. He turned to Team 10 and Naruto and spoke. It will take 3 days to reach the sand village from here. He began speaking in a serious tone as he eyed his team. Page for a week's journey at least, he commanded, causing the 3 genin to nod. Meet me at the west gate in 2 hours, he said, causing the 4 genin to nod before they all began making their way out of the room. As the genin all left the room, Asuma was about to follow suit, but the third Hokage stopped him. Asuma, the Hokage called out, stopping him. When you are in the sand village, do not use any of their last names, he warned, causing the Jonin to narrow his eyes. Especially when it comes to Naruto, he added in a serious tone. I understand, Asuma said with a nod. He was about to take the heirs of 4 clans into a foreign village, and one of those heirs was from one of the most famous clans in the whole elemental nations. Extra caution is warranted, even when it is an ally. With Naruto, after leaving the mission assignment center, Naruto went straight to Ichiraka Ramen. The ramen shop had easily become one of his favorite places in the entire village. Ducking under the banner and stepping into the shop, Naruto was greeted by the ramen shop's owner and his daughter. Welcome, Naruto. The owner, Tucci, greeted warmly as he laid eyes on one of his favorite customers. Hey, old man, Naruto replied with a grin before turning to the man's daughter. Hey, I am, he said with the same grin, earning warm smiles from both. What will it be today? The old man asked as his daughter held up a small notepad. It's going to be a large order, Naruto said with a smile as he sat down on one of the stools. Going on a mission, so I need 20 large miso ramen, 20 large bowls of seafood ramen, and 20 large bowls of tonkatsu ramen, he finished, causing the old chef's eyes to see dollar signs. Geez, Naruto, how long will you be gone for? I am asked as he looked over his order. About a week, but I'm getting enough for the entire team, he said with a chuckle. And there is going to be an Akimichi on the team with me, so, he said, trailing off, causing the father-daughter duo to nod their heads in understanding. Well, we'd better get started, the old chef said to his daughter. I'll be back in a little under an hour to pick it up, Naruto said as he stood up from the stool. He then left the shop and used the body flicker technique to appear back inside the Senju compound. Naruto made his way into the main house and down to the armory. Inside the armory were all kinds of weapons on racks lining the walls, with multiple crates filled with kunai and shurikens. On the far side of the armory was a large table. On it were a large pile of storage scrolls. Naruto had his clones seal away supplies into these scrolls so he could grab one to go, and it would contain all the supplies he needed to restock his pouch. Next to that pile was another stack of scrolls, only these were all empty storage scrolls. Naruto grabbed 2 scrolls with his supplies and an empty storage scroll before storing the 2 scrolls away within the empty scroll. He then picked up 8 additional empty scrolls and stored them away as well within the same scroll as his equipment scrolls. These always come in handy, he thought to himself as he stored the lone scroll he was left with into the storage seal on his wrist. He then made his way back upstairs to do some final checks. 1 hour later, Naruto was currently standing by the west gate, leaning against a tree that was right outside the gates, staring out at the path ahead of them. He was the first one to arrive, and neither the others nor their sensei had arrived as yet. He was about to take a seat on the ground, but the sound of loud munching got his attention. Turning his head to the side and glancing behind him, he saw Choji walking up towards him with a new bag of chips in his hands. "Hey Naruto," Choji said with a wave as he walked up to the blonde. "Hey Choji," Naruto replied as he turned and waved to the young clan heir. "Are the others not here yet?" he asked between bites. "Not as yet," Naruto replied with a shake of his head. "We're the first ones," he added. "INO usually takes forever to get ready," Choji said, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at him. "And Shikamaru probably fell asleep after he got ready," he added, causing Naruto to sweat drop. "And your sensei?" Naruto asked with a curious expression on his face. "He's probably going to show up any minute now with Shikamaru in tow," Choji said in a carefree manner as he was used to his team's dynamic by now. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at his explanation. "Hey guys!" came an excited shout from a voice both recognized to be INO. Looking over Choji's shoulder, Naruto saw INO with a backpack on running towards them, waving as she ran. INO ran up and stood beside the duo, tucking a few strands of hair behind her ear as she spoke. "Is Sensei not here yet?" she asked, resulting in both Naruto and Choji shaking their heads. "He must be getting Shikamaru," she noted, causing Choji to nod while Naruto simply chuckled. As they were talking, there was a puff of smoke just in front of the gate, grabbing their attention. When the smoke cleared, they saw Asuma standing there with a cigarette in his mouth and a backpack slung over his shoulders. Beside the Jonin sensei was Shikamaru with a bored expression on his face. "Sorry I'm late," Asuma said as he and Shikamaru walked up to the group. "I had to make sure someone was awake," he said, glancing down at Shikamaru. "Troublesome," Shikamaru mumbled under his breath as he let out a tired sigh. "Do you guys have everything you will need?" Asuma asked as he looked over his students, receiving nods from everyone. When his eyes landed on Naruto, he saw that he had no backpack or anything like the rest of the genin. "Where is your stuff, Naruto?" he asked with an eyebrow raised. "Right here," Naruto replied as he flicked his wrist, activating the storage seal, causing a small puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Naruto had a medium-sized scroll in his hand. "Storage scrolls," he said, earning a nod from the Jonin. "Smart," Asuma replied while nodding. "I got more if anyone wants to put their stuff inside," Naruto said as he produced 4 empty storage seals. Every member of Team 10, including their sensei, took Naruto up on his offer and sealed their backpacks away in one of the scrolls he had. With everyone's stuff now stored away, Asuma spoke to his team. "All right, with all that sorted, it's time we be on our way," he said with a calm look on his face. "Shikamaru, you and Choji will be in the front, Naruto and INO in the middle, and I will watch our rear," he said, earning nods from most of the genin. Shikamaru was the only one not to nod. He simply muttered about how troublesome this mission was under his breath, causing Naruto to chuckle while INO's eyebrow twitched at her teammate's laziness. With that, the group set off on their journey to the hidden sand village. As they were walking away, Choji would often turn back to look at the village growing further and further away from them. "Is anyone else nervous?" Choji asked lowly in a nervous tone. Shikamaru glanced over at his friend a bit before sighing to himself. "It's going to be fine," Shikamaru said lazily. "The Leaf Village and the Sand Village are allies, so there shouldn't be much to worry about," he said, trying to put his friend at ease. "Besides, even if something did happen, Asuma-sensei and Naruto are here," he added, causing the blonde to raise an eyebrow at the mention of his name. "Nothing to worry about, Choji," Asuma said, speaking up. "You rarely ever see combat on C-rank missions," he added, to which Naruto nodded in agreement. Even though he saw combat on both of his missions outside of the village, and the path between the two villages is heavily patrolled by both Leaf and Sand Shinobis, so there isn't much chance of running into any trouble. Naruto chimed in. Hearing everyone reassure him, Choji smiled and nodded before returning to munching on his bag of chips, causing both Asuma and Naruto to chuckle, while INO simply shook her head and smiled from beside Naruto. "All right, team," Asuma said, getting everyone's attention. "Time for us to pick up the pace," he said, earning nods from everyone. The group then disappeared from the spot on the road as they began tree running. At night, it was currently nightfall, and Asuma had decided it would be best for the group if they stopped and made camp for the night. They were currently looking for a spot to set up camp for the night. The group had spent most of the day running, only making short stops every couple of hours for breaks and lunch. During the many breaks they took, Naruto spent most of the time getting to know Team 10. He already had a chance to get to know INO a bit better when he was buying flowers yesterday, but had little to no interactions with the other two members of Team 10. He and Choji mostly bonded over ramen when Naruto shared some of his many bowls of ramen with the Akimichi. In turn, the young clan heir would share his chips with Naruto whenever they stopped for breaks. When it came to Shikamaru, the blonde found that the Nara heir simply enjoyed relaxing and staring at the clouds in the sky, something Naruto was happy to partake in. The peaceful serenity of lying amongst the trees, watching the clouds float by, made Naruto feel at home in the forest. "This should work," came Asuma's voice, breaking Naruto out of his thoughts. Walking over to where the Jonin was standing, Naruto saw he was in front of a small clearing surrounded by trees and bushes. The clearing was just large enough for a small campsite. "There is a stream just past that tree line with fresh water," he said, pointing to the tree line behind him. "Can we set up camp now?" INO asked, sounding very tired. "My feet are killing me," she added, shuffling her feet slightly. Asuma was about to respond to her, but before he could, Naruto spoke up. "In just a moment," Naruto replied as he stepped forward, gesturing for Asuma to give him a bit of room. "What are you doing?" Asuma asked as he stepped back a bit. "Setting up our campsite," Naruto replied before he began weaving through several hand signs before slamming both of his palms on the ground. "Wood style, 4-pillar house jutsu," Naruto shouted, sending his chakra into the ground. Suddenly, the ground around them shook, and wooden beams erupted from the earth like growing trees, twisting and branching upward with fluid grace. In seconds, the framework of a traditional-style home took shape, elegant yet sturdy, rooted into the earth as if it had always belonged there. Naruto then stood up and dusted off his hands before turning to face Team 10. "They're all done," he said as he turned, only to be met with the gobsmacked expressions of Team 10, causing him to grin sheepishly. They were all staring up at the house with their mouths hanging open and their eyes the size of dinner plates. Asuma's cigarette had fallen out of his mouth in shock at the sight of the first Hokage's bloodline in person. "It is the first Hokage's bloodline," he whispered in shock. Amazing," INO muttered in amazement. Choji just kept eating faster and faster as he stared at the house in awe. "Troublesome blonde," Shikamaru said, causing Naruto to flash him a grin and give him a thumbs up. "It never gets old," Naruto thought as he looked at everyone's reaction. "Well," Asuma began as he pulled out another cigarette and shook his head. "Seems we are camping there tonight," he said, taking another look at the house. Naruto led the way. He walked up and slid the door to the house open before he entered. The inside was just one big open room with a clay fireplace against the far wall, with a pile of firewood stacked neatly beside it. Naruto was not going for luxury. He went for a simple design for them to rest for the night. "I'll get a fire going," Asuma said, walking up to the fireplace and putting some wood inside before igniting it with a small fireball. Naruto and the rest of the team began unsealing their supplies from their storage seals. The first things Naruto took out from his seal were 4 paper tags with seals drawn on them. "What's that?" Shikamaru asked as he got a look at what Naruto unsealed, thanks to the light from the fireplace. "Concealment tags," he answered, holding them up for the young Nara to see. "Placing them on the 4 walls of the house should create a barrier, making it impossible for anyone to detect the house, allowing us to camp here in peace," he said, earning a nod from the Nara. "Need help?" the Nara heir asked, causing Naruto to share his head and hold up a half-ram seal, resulting in a puff of smoke appearing behind him. When the smoke cleared, a perfect copy of Naruto was revealed to be standing there. Without looking behind him, Naruto handed the seals to the clone, who took them and walked out of the house to begin placing the tags. "You are just full of surprises, aren't you, Naruto?" INO asked with a giggle, causing her fellow blonde to shoot her a grin and a wink, resulting in a small blush to creep up onto her face. "Troublesome blondes," Shikamaru said as he lay down on his backpack. "Shut up, Shika," INO shouted before she crossed her arms and blew her bangs from in front of her face. Naruto just chuckled and got closer to the fire before he unsealed his ramen. "I got plenty more ramen if anyone wants," he said as he grabbed a bowl of miso ramen for himself. "I'll take a seafood ramen," Shikamaru said, getting up and moving over next to the blonde Senju. "One for me as well," INO said as she hurried to take the open spot next to Naruto. "I'll take a miso ramen, please," Choji said as he plopped down next to INO. As Naruto handed out the ramen to everyone, he looked at the lone jonin amongst them and spoke. "What about you, sensei?" he asked while looking at Asuma. Asuma just smiled and blew out some smoke. "I'm all good," he said as he pulled out a rice ball from his storage seal and sat down next to Shikamaru. "Naruto," Choji said with a mouth full of ramen, "I remember Irika-sensei said you lived outside the village before you took the test. Where did you live?" he asked, causing everyone to look at the blonde awaiting this response. "I lived in the capital," Naruto replied nonchalantly, surprising everyone. "You mean, like, the capital? With the Fire Lord and all that?" INO asked as she held the ramen noodles a few inches away from her mouth in shock. "Yep. Big buildings, fancy robes, shinobi security everywhere. It's where I did most of my early training with my grandmother," Naruto said with a nod before slurping up some noodles. "That explains why you're so freakily strong," Shikamaru said with a sigh before he brought the bowl to his lips and drank some of the broth. Asuma finally exhaled a long stream of smoke before he spoke up. "Makes sense. If you were training under Lady Tsunade in the capital all those years," he said, staring into the fire. "She would have made sure you came back strong enough to take care of yourself," he added, earning a chuckle from Naruto. "Well, I had to be strong. I got a legacy to honor. Couldn't afford to show up half-baked," he said with a chuckle before gulping down some more ramen. "Well, you definitely made an entrance. The whole village's been talking about the Senju heir ever since you got back," INO said as she tilted her head with a small smile forming on her lips. Naruto looked up from his bowl of ramen and simply grinned at her. "Troublesome blondes," Shikamaru mumbled as he stood up and got his sleeping bag out. "All right," Asuma said as he too stood up. "I'll take first watch, Naruto, you take second," he said, causing Naruto to nod. Everyone then finished their meal and got ready to turn in for the night. One day later, after running through the forest of the Land of Fire and the Land of Rivers, the group finally arrived at the border of the Land of Wind. They had spent the past day traveling almost non-stop, only stopping for periodic breaks and lunch. They had made camp in the Land of Rivers the previous night in a similar fashion to the first night. Asuma had woken them all up before dawn to get an early start this morning. He reasons that it would not be good for them to get caught in the desert at night, which can be very cold. He also did not want to get to the sand village later in the evening and have to spend the night there. Naruto couldn't help but agree. He did not want to spend the night there either. "All right, it should be half a day's journey from here," Asuma said as they all stared out at the barren desert in front of them. "This is going to be very troublesome," Shikamaru said with a sigh. They were all beginning to feel the heat of the desert, and they knew it was only to get worse the further they went. "For once I agree with you," INO said as she adjusted her ponytail. "What if there was a way for us to get there faster?" Naruto suddenly asked, causing everyone to turn their attention to him while he just stood there grinning sheepishly. "If you've got one of your tricks up your sleeve to make this trip faster, I am all for it," Asuma replied while the three members of his genin team nodded in agreement. None of them wanted to spend any more time than they had to in the desert. "All right then," Naruto said before walking up to the head of the group. He then began weaving hand signs, stopping on the sign for the snake. "With style, with dragon jutsu," he shouted. Just as he finished, from the ground before him, Thick wooden tendrils exploded upward, twisting and intertwining as they rapidly formed the massive, serpentine shape of a towering dragon made of living wood. Bark peeled away like scales, leaves sprouting along its spine as the creature took full form. Its long, coiled body arched protectively over Naruto, glowing faintly with chakra. "No way," Ino whispered out as her mouth fell open. "That thing is huge," Choji said, taking a step back. "I don't think I am ever going to get used to you, Naruto," Shikamaru said, staring up at the towering dragon before them. This is the stuff of legends," Asuma muttered as his cigarette fell from his mouth. What they were all seeing before them right now was only something they read about in textbooks that talked about the first Hokage. While they were all in shock at the sight before them, Naruto weaved 2 more hand signs, causing wooden beams to sprout out from the back of the dragon and form seats for them to sit on and a roof over their heads to protect them from the sun. "There," he said, turning around with a wide smile on his face. "We can ride on its back." He began but trailed off when he saw all of them staring at him. "What?" he asked before looking around at his clothes. "Do I have something on me?" he asked as he examined himself. "Idiot," Ino said, shaking her head at the clueless Naruto before he hopped up and took one of the seats at the front. "Naruto should come on all our missions," Choji suggested as he too hopped up on the dragon's back, sitting behind Ino. "I have no complaints," Shikamaru said as he hopped up and sat down next to Choji. "I don't have to do as much work if he comes along," he added, causing Naruto to chuckle. "You barely do any work now," Asuma said as he hopped on, taking the seat at the back. Naruto hopped on the wooden dragon with everyone else and plopped himself down next to Ino. "I would recommend using chakra to keep yourself in the seat," Naruto said as he looked over his shoulder. After getting a nod from everyone, he turned around and spoke. "Very well then, off we go," he said as he gave the wooden dragon the command to go forward. Everyone's body jerked backward as the serpentine dragon began slithering across the sands of the desert at amazing speeds. "Huh, this is actually working," Naruto commented as they traversed the desert. "What do you mean, actually working?" Ino asked as she stared at the blonde with a questioning look. "What?" he asked, looking back at her. "I've never done this before," he admitted with a wide grin on his face, causing her eyes to widen in shock/horror, which only made him burst out laughing. "Naruto!" Ino yelled out, which only made him laugh harder. The wooden dragon traverses the desert with much ease, slithers through the sand as if it were on water. The group rode on the back of the dragon for about 2 hours before it began to slow down. Naruto then navigated the dragon behind a large dune before coming to a complete stop. "Okay, we have to walk from here," Naruto said, turning and looking at everyone. "The village should be about an hour's walk from here," he added as he ran his fingers through his hair. "Why are we walking the rest of the way?" Ino asked with a confused look on her face. "'Cause I'm pretty sure if they see a large wooden dragon charging towards their village, it will set off a few alarms," he answered, causing her to understand. "Besides, I don't want to announce the fact that I have a bloodline that hasn't been seen for a few decades," he added as he jumped off from atop the dragon. He then held out his hand for Ino, which she took and helped her down. Speaking of which, Naruto began looking in Asuma's direction. "Way ahead of you there," Asuma said before Naruto could finish, causing the blonde to nod. "None of you is to mention your last names," Asuma said in a serious tone as he looked at his genins. The 3 genins looked at each other before nodding affirmatively to their sensei. Once everyone was off the wooden dragon, they all watched as it buried itself in the sand at Naruto's command, perfectly hiding itself from view. "That should do," Naruto said, dusting off his hands. "We'll pick it back up on our way back," he added, causing Asuma to nod. "All right, let's go," Asuma said as he led the way with this team following behind. The group walked through the desert for about 30 minutes with the sun beating down on them relentlessly before the walls of the sand village came into view. "There it is," Asuma said as they all looked at the stone walls that surrounded the village. "The village hidden in the sand," he said. As the group got closer, they saw that the entrance to the village was a single cleft between 2 cliff faces. When the group was about 50 feet away from the entrance of the village, a loud shout from the entrance halted them. "Halt!" a man's voice commanded. "State your business," he yelled out. Asuma stepped in front of the group and spoke. "We are shinobi from the Hidden Leaf Village," he yelled back at the unknown person. "We have a delivery for the Kazekage from the Hokage," Asuma shouted out. Silence followed his statement before they could see the silhouette of someone walking out from the entrance of the village. The man was dressed in the standard uniform for a jonin of the Sand Village. As he approached, Naruto discreetly began to suppress his chakra down to match the level of the other members of Team 10. If there were any sensory ninjas around, he did not want to raise any alarm bells. "Identify yourself," the man said in a stern voice. "We are not aware of any deliveries from the Leaf Village," he stated as he eyed them all suspiciously. "I am Asuma Sarutobi," Asuma said, causing the man's eye to widen slightly. "And this is my genin team," he continued, gesturing to the group behind him. "We are simply here to deliver this year's Chunin exam applications to the Kazekage," he said smoothly, trying to put the man at ease. The man looked them over once more, his eyes lingering on Asuma a bit longer than the others. "I am Rensa Sabaku," the man said, introducing himself. "Please follow me. I will lead you to the Kazekage's office," he said seriously, causing Asuma to smile at him. "Thank you, Rensa," Asuma said politely. The man then turned and began walking back towards the cleft. Naruto and Team 10 followed closely behind Asuma through the village entrance and not the village. The village itself lay in a fortified valley behind cliffs of rock, providing great natural defense from foreign invaders. The buildings inside seemed to be made of clay or stucco, which Naruto assumed helped in keeping the buildings cool. As they walked through the streets of the Sand Village, the group couldn't help but notice all the looks they were getting from both civilians and shinobi alike. Everyone in their group could tell there was hostility in all of those looks. It made even the usually bored and lazy Shikamaru appear on high alert. Naruto didn't understand the reason for those looks, and that made him even more uneasy. The sand and the leaf have been allies for decades, Naruto thought to himself as he tried to make sense of hostility towards them. This is something the Hokage will have to be made aware of, he thought, making a mental note to mention it to Asuma. Naruto glanced over at INO to see how she was doing, only to find her looking at her feet as she walked. She was uncomfortable with the stairs, especially these stairs. Wanting to put her at ease a bit, he walked closer to her, letting his shoulders brush against her, getting her attention. INO felt his touch and looked up at him. As their eyes met, Naruto gave her a warm smile, causing her to blush slightly and smile back at him. "We're here," Rensa said, getting everyone's attention as they stopped in front of the Kazekage's office. The building was a large, round, sandy-colored building with several rows of windows and the kanji for wind painted on the side of the building in a circle. "This is the Kazekage's office. Please follow me inside," he said before he entered the building with the group of Leaf Shinobi following behind him. Rensa led the group up a variety of stairs before they finally came to a stop outside of what Naruto assumed to be the Kazekage office. "Please wait here," Rensa said to Asuma before he knocked on the door twice and entered. "I will do all the talking," Asuma turned and said to the genins, causing all four of them to nod. No one said anything else. They all just stood in the hallway waiting. After about 5 minutes, the door to the office reopened, and Rensa came out. "The Kazekage will see you now," he said, gesturing for them to enter the room. Asuma nodded and then led the group into the room. Inside the office, there was only a desk and a chair for the Kazekage to work. There were no bookshelves like in the Hokage's office, nor any chairs for guests to sit on. "Greetings, Lord Kazekage," Asuma said respectfully, bowing, which all the genin mirrored. "Welcome to the Hidden Sand Village," the Kazekage said from behind his desk. Raising their heads, the genin saw a man sitting behind the desk in his full Kage attire and a veil covering the lower half of his face. "To what do I owe the pleasure of a visit from the third Hokage's son?" he asked, eyeing Asuma. The jonin reached into his pouch and pulled out the scroll he received from the Hokage and stepped forward, placing it on the Kazekage's desk before stepping back. We are merely here to deliver the applications for this year's Chunin exams, Asuma answered with a smile. The Kazekage took the scroll and opened it out on his desk before placing some chakra into the storage seal, resulting in a small puff of smoke on the desk. When the smoke cleared, everyone saw a stack of papers resting on the scroll. I see, the Kazekage said, inspecting one of the applications. Very good. My children will be competing in this year's exams, so thank you for this, he said politely before turning his attention to the genins standing behind Asuma. Will your team be competing as well? He asked as he eyed all the genin. I am not sure as yet, Asuma admitted. This is only their first mission outside of the village, he said with a light chuckle. I see, he said as his eyes landed on Naruto and lingered a bit, causing both Asuma and Naruto's heart rate to increase a bit. Well, we don't want to disturb you further, Lord Kazekage, Asuma said, capturing the man's attention once more. We better be on our way. Don't want to get stuck in the desert come nightfall, he said smoothly. Very well, the Kazekage said with a wave. Please give my regards to Lord Third, he said, earning a nod from Asuma before the group bowed to the Kage and exited the office. They found Rensa waiting for them outside the office. Without saying a word, the man began leading the group out of the building and out of the village. As soon as they were out of the village, Asuma bid Rensa goodbye before Team 10 began their trek back to the dune where the wooden dragon was hiding. After another 30-minute walk under the desert sun, they finally arrived at the dune. Naruto commanded the dragon to the surface, and the group hopped on its back and began the journey back home. 3 days later, after 3 days of traveling, Team 10 finally arrived back at the gates of the Hidden Leaf Village from which they left a week ago. As much as Naruto liked going on missions outside of the village, he was happy to be back home. Man, it feels good to be back home, Naruto said as they walked through the gate. I hear you, INO said from beside the blonde. I can't wait to hop in the bath, she said as she rubbed the back of her neck. Same here, Choji said as he opened a fresh bag of chips. I'm sure I still got sand in places it shouldn't be, Shikamaru said in a tired voice, earning a chuckle from his sensei. Well, before you all go running off, we have to report to Lord Hokage, Asuma said, earning groans from his students. The groups marched on to the Hokage's office. Arriving in front of the Hokage's office, Asuma greeted the Hokage's secretary warmly. Hi Rika, Asuma said with a smile. Is he free? He asked. Rika, the Hokage's secretary, smiled at Asuma before replying. He is. You can go in, she said while gesturing to the door. Nodding to the secretary, Asuma walked up and opened the door before leading the genins into the Hokage's office. Inside the office, the Hokage was sitting behind his desk with 2 large piles of paperwork in front of him. Looking up from his desk, he saw Team 10 entering, causing him to smile warmly at the genin as they entered. Ah, Team 10, he said as he picked up his pipe from the ashtray on his desk. Welcome back. I take it your mission went well? He asked before taking a small puff from his pipe. Yes, Lord Hokage, Asuma said as he handed the C-rank scroll back to the Hokage. Wonderful news, the Hokage said, opening the scroll and making it complete. I think you all earned tomorrow off, the aged Hokage said, looking at the genin team, causing them all to smile appreciatively. Thank you, Lord Hokage, the 4 of them said in unison with a bow. Why don't you all head home now and get some rest? I'll finish up here, Asuma said, looking back at his team. The 4 nodded and exited the room, leaving the Jonin and Hokage alone in the room. Something else you need to report? The Hokage asked as he looked at his son. Just something Naruto and I picked up on while we were in the Sand Village, Asuma said, causing his father to raise an eyebrow at the mention of the blonde Senju. Even though no one tried anything, we could feel a lot of animosity directed towards us from the general population in the Sand Village, he reported, causing his father to nod his head slowly in acknowledgement. Jiraiya has been reporting the same, the Hokage admitted as he exhaled a stream of smoke. It seems to be stemming from the fact that the Wind Lord has been requesting missions from the leaf rather than the sand, he said, surprising the Jonin. Shikaku is aware as well. We don't expect anything to happen, but things are being put in place in case it does, the Hokage said seriously, causing his son to let out a sigh. When will the cycle end? Asuma asked as he lit a new cigarette. With Naruto, after leaving the Hokage's office, Naruto bid Team 10 goodbye and headed straight to the clan's compound. After packing his stuff away, he went straight to take a bath. Shikamaru was right. There was sand in places it shouldn't be. A bath and a visit to the hot springs sound in order, he thought as he stepped into the shower, letting the water wash away all the dirt and grime. Chapter 11. Deals in the Dark. 2 months had passed since Naruto and Team 10 completed their mission to the Sand Village. During that time, life had been somewhat eventful for Naruto. He had attended numerous council meetings, especially with the Chunin exams now only 3 months away. Construction on the stadium began just a week after his return. Tsunade brought workers from the Land of Waves and hired additional help from the Leaf Village to speed up the project. Naruto was genuinely surprised by the number of villagers who signed up to work under Tsunade. With more people working, the village's economy has grown significantly over the past 2 months, something the council was especially pleased with. It was nighttime in the village, and Naruto was walking toward the commercial district. He enjoyed the cool night breeze against his face, taking in the lively scene around him. The village was glowing. Shop lights lit up the streets, restaurants buzzed with activity, and couples filled the streets on evening dates. Naruto couldn't help but smile. The atmosphere was peaceful, warm, and alive. He continued walking for another 5 minutes before stopping in front of a 2-story building. Looking up at the sign above the entrance, Naruto smiled proudly as he read the sign. Senju Shipping Company. As he stepped inside, his thoughts drifted back to the council meeting held the day after he returned from the Sand Village. It was during that meeting that he had secured the land for the building, among other things. Flashback. Council chambers. All members of the council were currently present inside the council chambers. The only empty seat was that of the Uchiha clan. Naruto was sitting in his seat as the acting head of the Senju clan, observing the various interactions of the council members. The third Hokage had yet to arrive, so the session could not begin without him present. Across from him, the civilians on the council were whispering amongst themselves, mostly about useless things Naruto found unimportant. On the shinobi side of the council, most of the clan heads just sat there silently, or in the Nara clan head's case, resting his head on the table. Anyone got any idea what this meeting is supposed to be about? Sum Inuzuka asked loudly. The bridge builder from the Land of Waves recently arrived in the village, so I am assuming it's about the construction that needs to be done to the stadium, Naruto replied, looking down the table at the Inuzuka clan's head. As he finished speaking, the side doors of the council chambers swung open, getting everyone's attention. Glancing behind him, Naruto saw the Hokage walking into the room, followed by his 2 advisors and Danzo. The third Hokage took his seat at the center table while Danzo and his advisors sat on 3 smaller tables, which lined the far wall. "Hello, everyone," Lord Hokage said as he sat down. "Thank you all for coming. Hopefully, this will be a short council session today," he said, looking around the room, smiling at everyone. "Hopefully we don't have any delays by people trying to kill me again," Naruto joked with a slight smirk tugging against his lips. The third Hokage and a few members of the Shinobi Council chuckled at Naruto's statement while sneaking glances at Danzo. The old warhawk did not show any outward response, but they all knew he was seething on the inside. "I'm sure we won't have anything like that happen this time, my boy," the Hokage said with a light chuckle. "But on with today's agenda," he said, seriously getting everyone's attention. "The builder from the Land of Waves has accepted our commission to upgrade the stadium," he said, glancing around the room. "How much will it cost?" One of the merchants on the civilian side of the council asked. Lord Third took a drag from his pipe and exhaled a stream of smoke before he responded. "It will cost about $12 million, the Hokage answered, surprising everyone. "I take it that's his discounted price?" Naruto asked, looking at the Hokage. "Correct, and he has agreed to hire those in the village willing to work as well," he replied as he leaned back into his chair. "Which should benefit the village to an extent," he added. "The return we will receive in business from the Chunin exams will at least double our investment," Inoichi said from down the table. I agree with Lord Yamanaka, Mabuki Haruno said from directly across Naruto. Anyone object? Lord Third asked, looking around the room. Everyone remained silent, causing the aged Hokage to nod. The only issue now is the raw materials, he said with a sigh. It would take a while for them to obtain the necessary amount of lumber from the various sawmills around the Land of Fire, which in turn would delay the start of construction. The Senju clan can provide all the lumber needed, Naruto said, seriously grabbing everyone's attention. Are you sure, Naruto? Lord Third asked, looking at the young blonde. It's no problem for me, Naruto replied as he held his hand out in front of him. A moment later, a small wooden beam burst forth from his palm, extending to the civilian side. Everyone, barring the Hokage, had their eyes widened in pure amazement. This was their first time seeing the famed bloodline of the first Hokage. Granted, it was not anything special that Naruto was doing, but in the eyes of those who have only heard stories from their grandparents or read about it in textbooks, it was amazing to witness firsthand. Amazing. One of the civilians whispered out as she stared in awe at the wooden beam. The wooden beam broke off his palm, and Naruto caught it, holding it up for everyone to see. The lumber I would supply would be infused with chakra, making it stronger to withstand attacks during the exams, and it will overall last longer, Naruto said, passing the beam to the Hokage. He's right, Hiruzen, came the voice of one of his advisors, getting everyone's attention. Looking past the Hokage, everyone could see it was Koharu who spoke. There are still buildings standing tall today that Lord Hashirama built, she said, causing Lord Third and her partner Hamura to nod in agreement. What's your price? Danzo asked gruffly, his tone cutting through the room's reverent silence, capturing everyone's attention for a brief moment before they all turned towards Naruto, who couldn't stop himself from smirking as he turned and looked at the Hokage. I only require 2 things, he began, causing a few people to raise an eyebrow at him. First, I want a plot of land in the commercial district, he said, surprising some council members. Those who weren't surprised were already aware of Naruto's acquisition of Gato Transports, now named the Senju Shipping Company. And secondly, I want exclusive say on who gets advertisement rights at the stadium for the Chunin exams, he said, this time surprising everyone inside the council chambers. Flashback end. As Naruto stepped through the doors of the Senju Shipping Company, the faint scent of fresh wood and parchment greeted him. The interior was warm and earthy, with smooth wooden walls and support beams crafted from chakra-infused timber, a signature of his wood style. The floors gleamed with a soft lacquered finish, each step quiet and sturdy beneath his feet. To the left was a modest front desk, manned by a young clerk diligently sorting through scroll manifests and delivery ledgers. The clerk was actually one of Naruto's shadow clones, transformed to resemble a young woman. Behind them, a wall-mounted board displayed a rotating map of the Land of Fire with glowing pins indicating current routes, active shipments, and priority deliveries. The main floor was open and organized, lined with wooden shelving units stacked with sealed crates, scroll racks, and labeled storage boxes. Each bore the Senju clan crest, painted in green and gold. The right wall held a series of sliding cabinets filled with pre-written contracts, permit forms, and alliance documents. At the far wall, nestled between 2 tall wooden support pillars, was a reinforced oak door marked Authorized Personnel Only. It led to the basement, a secure lower level used for preparing high-priority shipments. Only trusted employees had access to it, and the door was sealed with a subtle chakra lock tied to Naruto's seal. A spiral staircase at the far end led to the second floor, where Naruto kept his office. The glass windows lining the upstairs floor offered a clear view of the commercial district, allowing him to stay connected to the village he loved. Everything about the space was functional yet refined, reflecting both the legacy of the Senju name and Naruto's personal touch. It wasn't just a shipping company. It was a declaration that the Senju clan had returned, and it was building a future. Hey, boss, the disguised clone said in a feminine voice. It had honestly taken Naruto a few days to get used to hearing one of his clones sounding like that. Hey, Rika, Naruto replied with a smirk as he walked up to the desk. How was business today? He asked, leaning against the desk. Not too busy today, Rika replied cheerfully. Had a few merchants stop by to inquire about our trading routes. I think business is going to be picking up soon, she said, earning a thoughtful nod from Naruto. Seems I need to see about getting you some help then, he said with a sigh. Finding someone he could trust to run things here for him was harder than he had first thought. Most people who sign up to work for him are more interested in his clan and his bloodline. He had no doubt Danzo would try to sneak one of his people in to spy on Naruto's business. Danzo was the main reason Naruto had taken extra precautions with this new building. He added extra security seals to the basement and his office to severely punish anyone who would try to enter without his permission. That would be great. Rika beamed, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at her. They're enjoying this way too much, Naruto thought, narrowing his eyes slightly at the clone. Anyway, I am going to check out some stuff downstairs, he said, pushing away from the desk and beginning to make his way to the door on the far wall. Arriving at the door, he bit his thumb and smeared some of his blood across the seal. He then placed his palm over the seal and channeled his chakra into it. The seal glowed faintly for a second before returning to its original state. Naruto then pulled the door open and made his way down to the basement. The basement was primarily used for storing high-value cargo. Large crates lined either side of the space, each bearing the Senju clan symbol. Naruto stood in place for 2 minutes before he held up a half-snake seal in one hand and focused his chakra. From his back, a wooden copy of himself sprouted out and stood next to him. Naruto and his clone looked at each other and nodded before the clone made its way up the stairs and back out the door to the main floor. Naruto could hear his clone bidding Rika goodnight as it exited the shop. That clone would distract anyone who was keeping track of him while he conducted the business he came out to do tonight. At the far wall of the basement, Naruto placed his palm against the stone and channeled chakra into it. A large ceiling matrix shimmered into view, glowing faintly before vanishing to reveal a concealed doorway. Opening the door revealed a tunnel on the other side. A tunnel made using the earth ninjutsu and reinforced with Naruto's would release. Before entering the tunnel, Naruto weaved through 3 hand signs and concentrated intensely. With style, transformation, he murmured, forming the final hand sign. Roots rose from the floor, wrapping around him in a twisting cocoon. A soft puff of smoke followed, and when it cleared, a tall man with brown hair and black eyes stood in his place. Looking himself over, Naruto found the physical transformation to be satisfactory. Test, he muttered, his voice cracking slightly as he worked to mask his natural tone. 10 tiny toads tiptoed through torrential thunder toward the Hokage's tower, he recited, his voice dropping deeper with each repetition. 10 tiny toads tiptoed through torrential thunder toward the Hokage's tower. This time it came out smooth and low, perfect. Smiling to himself, he pulled the hood over his head and stepped into the tunnel, closing the door behind him. The tunnel was long and poorly lit, and the sound of his steel-toed boots echoed throughout the tunnel. He walked for about 15 minutes before arriving at the end of the tunnel. At the end, there was a ladder leading to the surface. He climbed the ladder and undid the security seals on the exit, then climbed out and resealed the exit shut. Looking around at his surroundings, he was currently in an alleyway between 2 abandoned warehouses. There was no light currently in the alleyway, and his black hooded coat ensured that he blended in with his surroundings. Making his way to the entrance of the alley, he navigated the many obstacles that were scattered about in the alley. Stopping at the entrance, he looked out across the street at the alley on the other side before dashing across the street and into another dark alley. He continued this process, traveling only to his destination under the cover of darkness, using the alleyways as cover. He continued for about 15 minutes before arriving in an alleyway in the red light district. Stepping out of the alley, he began walking calmly through the street. The streets of the red light district were not as well lit as those of the commercial district. Most of its lighting came from the various bars and brothels that lined the area. Naruto couldn't help but take in the sights all around him. The streets were filled with drunk civilians and shinobi alike, staggering from one side to the next. In certain parts, scantily clad girls stood outside of their respective brothels, trying to persuade men and women who walked past to join them inside for some entertainment. Naruto ignored all the offers he received and continued walking. He ultimately came to a stop in front of a lone brothel between two bars with a neon sign that read, Red Lotus. Unlike the other brothels Naruto had passed on his way there, this one did not have any girls outside trying to seduce men, it did not have any loud music playing, and most of all, it did not appear as though there were any customers inside. Adjusting his hood and sneaking glances around him to check if anyone was paying attention to him, which they weren't, Naruto then walked up to the entrance and slid the door open. "Oh, a customer," came a bubbly voice greeting Naruto as he entered. Looking to his left, he saw a young woman in her early to mid-20s, with her hair tied up in a bun, wearing nothing but a loose robe over what appeared to be black lingerie. Naruto had to admit, she was pretty attractive. She was standing behind a small podium with a large ledger in front of her. "Would you be interested in some company tonight?" she asked with a smile. Naruto looked around the brothel and saw that, apart from the girls who worked there, he was the only person present. There was light music playing, but all around were the girls, some in more clothes than others, sitting around with bored expressions on all of their faces. "Sir?" the girl said, snapping Naruto out of his musing. "Apologies," he replied in his deep voice with a slight bow. "I am here to see the madam of this establishment, actually," he said smoothly. The girl eyed him carefully for a few seconds, trying to get a better look under his hood, before she responded. "Sorry, sir," she said, smiling sweetly with a smile that Naruto knew was fake. "Lady Yoru is quite busy right now," she said smoothly. Naruto smirked under his hood before he brought his hand up and rested it on top of the ledger she had in front of her. When he removed his hand, a small stack of cash was left resting there. "That's unfortunate," he said smoothly as he removed his hand. "Do you think she will have time for me this evening?" he asked lowly. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of the cash, and she immediately looked around to see if anyone saw. She breathed out a sigh of relief as no one seemed to have seen the cash. All the girls on the floor were focused on the mystery hooded man rather than her, and from the way Naruto was standing, he blocked the view of the podium. She quickly snatched the money from the ledger and tucked it away, where Naruto could only imagine. "Right this way, sir," she said with a smile, stepping out from behind the podium. She began leading Naruto further into the brothel. As they walked through the open floor of the brothel, girls would try to seduce Naruto, offering themselves to him even though none of them could see what he looked like. Naruto followed the girl through a series of corridors and up a slight set of stairs to the second floor, where they arrived at a long hallway lined with numerous rooms on either side. At the end of the hallway was a large double door, well decorated with two men standing outside as guards. Naruto assumed that behind those doors was the madam of this brothel. He was proven to be right in his assumption when the girl began leading him down the hallway towards those doors. As they got closer, his attention turned to the two men standing guard at the door. Judging from the amount of chakra they currently have, he surmised that they are both former shinobi. Judging from their chakra levels, they could barely pass a chunin, he thought as he studied the men from under his hood. The two likely did not have what it takes to become chunins and decided to quit the shinobi life. Being bodyguards is likely paid better than D-rank missions. With their level of skill, Naruto was not worried about being discovered to be under a transformation jutsu. It was the reason he used the wood release version of the transformation jutsu. It would be difficult for most jonins to discover it, much less two failed genin. As they approached the door, the girl turned to Naruto and spoke. "Please wait here a moment," she said with a smile and a bow before turning around and walking through the large double doors, leaving Naruto alone with the two bodyguards. Naruto stood there in silence while the two men guarding the doors were trying to size him up, trying to intimidate him with their body language. He shook his head and ignored the two. He instead began focusing on the chakra signatures around him, wanting to ensure there were no unwanted listeners present to eavesdrop on his conversations. Currently, there are only 3 people other than himself with a chakra pool large enough to be considered a shinobi. 2 of them were standing guard at the door, and the other was within the room that lay behind the doors. After waiting for about 5 more minutes, the doors swung open once more, and the young woman exited, leaving the doors open behind her. "The lady will see you now," she said with a bow. Naruto nodded and made his way towards the room, walking between the two guards, not sparing them a glance. As he entered the room, he closed the doors behind him and scanned the room. The air inside was still faintly perfumed with jasmine and sandalwood, but the scent was old, clinging to the fabric rather than freshly burned. The lighting was dim, cast by a single half-functional paper lantern that buzzed softly in protest. The room still clung to the remnants of its past elegance. The once pristine plum-colored drapes lining the walls were now faded and fraying at the edges, their golden embroidery dulled with age. A few sections sagged slightly where the hooks had come loose. The floor creaked beneath even the lightest steps, the polished wood worn thin in the places she paced most often. At the center of the room was a small rectangular table with two couches on either side. Standing behind the far couch was the Madame of the Red Lotus, the Lady Yoru. She was in her early 30s, with long black hair that flowed down past her hips. She wore a beautiful red kimono with golden embroidery that flowed with her curves. Even though her brothel was in a tough state of affairs, her beauty still shone through. "I take it you are the mysterious gentleman who wishes to meet with me?" she asked, breaking Naruto out of his surveying. "So much so that he is willing to pay a large sum of money just for an audience," she added, holding up the small stack of money Naruto had used to bribe the hostess. He chuckled at the sight of the stack. Loyalty. Good, he thought to himself. He then reached into his coat, pulled out a small tag with seals drawn on it. He reached behind him and slapped the tag over the seam where the two doors meet before channeling some chakra into the tag. Yoru's eyes widened in shock when she saw what Naruto was doing. Explosive tag, she thought in a panic before flicking her wrist, launching two kunai in Naruto's direction. Without looking, Naruto skillfully caught both kunais with one hand, surprising her. Just then, runes began spreading out from the tag on the door, covering the entire room before they all disappeared. Naruto then turned to the woman and took off his hood, revealing his face. "There, now we can talk," he said smoothly as he walked forward and took a seat on the couch nearest to him, placing the two kunais on the small table in front of them. He looked up at the woman still standing behind the sofa, staring at him with a slightly terrified look on her face. After seeing how easily he caught her kunais, she realized that the man in front of her was much more skilled than she was. "Please have a seat," he said smoothly, gesturing for her to take a seat across from him. "Who are you?" Yoru asked as she carefully walked around and sat down across from him. "And what do you want?" she asked, her eyes glancing at the tag he placed on the door. At first, she thought it was an explosive tag, but it appears to be something else entirely, something she was unfamiliar with. "And what's that tag you placed on my door?" she asked nervously. "You sure have a lot of questions," Naruto said with a chuckle. "But I suppose it's only natural," he added, folding one of his legs over the other. Yoru was unnerved by how calm he was. She had no control over the current situation, and he was aware of it. "You can call me Mr. Black," Naruto said with a smirk. "And as for that tag," he turned and looked at the tag stuck to the doors. "It's a privacy seal. I did not want this conversation to be overheard," he said, surprising her and piquing her curiosity. "So no one outside can hear anything that is happening here?" she asked while staring at the tag with interest. "That is correct," he replied with a nod. Her curiosity was immediately replaced with terror as she realized that if he were to attack her, no one would hear her screams. Getting a good idea of the thought that was running through her mind, Naruto spoke up. "Be at ease, I mean you no harm," he said calmly in an attempt to get her to relax. "What is it exactly you want?" she asked carefully, eyeing the man in front of her with suspicion. Naruto smiled at her before he replied. "I have a proposition for you," he said as he reached into his coat and pulled out a small sealing scroll. He unrolled the scroll in front of the table between the two and unsealed its contents. After a small puff of smoke, a black briefcase appeared on the table between the two. Naruto opened the latches on either side of the case and opened it, revealing that it was filled with cash. Yoru's eyes widened at the amount of money that was in front of her. Never in her life had she seen such a large amount of money in one place, not even when her business was at its peak. That's $500,000, Naruto said, shocking her once more. With that much, I could pay back some of the money I owe, she thought, staring into the briefcase, losing herself in the allure of all that money. Naruto then slammed the lid of the briefcase shut, snapping her out of her trance. Seems I have your attention, Naruto said with a smile. What is it exactly you want from me? She asked as she narrowed her eyes at him. I want to employ your services, he said smoothly with a smirk. You get to keep that cash, and all you have to do is provide me with information on some of the people who request your little establishment when I ask for it, he finished, causing her to chuckle. I don't know if you've noticed, but there isn't exactly a line outside the door of people rushing to spend their money here, she said in a slightly frustrated tone. I'm well aware of that, Naruto replied calmly with a smile. That will change, he added, causing her to raise an eyebrow at him. Oh? And do tell, how exactly is that going to change? She asked, raising her voice slightly. Her confidence had grown dramatically since she saw the money in the briefcase and heard Naruto's proposal. The fear she had a couple of minutes ago was no longer there. Simple, we just put your competitors out of business, he stated, causing Yoru's eyebrow to twitch slightly. It bugged her how carefree he was about her situation. He made it sound like it was such an easy thing to do, putting her biggest competitors out of business. Do you want to know why your competitors are having so much success while you are having none? He asked in a calm voice. Because they let their clients do whatever they want of those girls, she spat out in a disgusted tone. I would never let one of those drunk rich bastards harm one of my girls, she said, staring at him fiercely. Commendable, Naruto replied with a nod. But that is not the reason, he stated, surprising her slightly. Unlike you, all of your competitors are in good favor with the civilians on the council, he said thoughtfully. Naruto had done his research before coming here. He knew everything about Lady Yoru, her competitors, and the small power struggle currently occurring within the red light district. All we need to do is remove their support on the council and get you in the good graces of someone on the council, he stated with a confident smirk. You make it sound so easy, she said sarcastically, earning a chuckle from Naruto. Oh, but it is easy, Naruto replied confidently. I can get you in not just with the council, but with someone on the shinobi side of the council, he stated, causing her eyes to widen in shock. She knew all too well that it was the shinobi who ran the village. They had the final say on everything. Although there were civilians on the council, they were merely there to offer their opinions on matters. They held no sway whatsoever. So let me get this straight, she began, leaning forward a bit. You are going to pay me $500,000, put my competitors out of business, and get me in the good graces of one of the clan heads on the shinobi council, and all you want in return is information? She asked in a suspicious tone. It all sounded too good to be true in her mind. Don't be ridiculous, Naruto replied in a serious tone. Do you think I am giving you that $500,000 out of the goodness of my heart? He asked, tilting his head to one side. Yoru bit her lips and cursed herself internally as a feeling of dread washed over her. That money is to buy you out, he stated in a calm voice. Her eyes widened slightly as realization hit her. You will continue to work here as the madam, of course, but I will be the one in charge, he stated with a smirk. And what makes you think I will even agree to any of this? She asked, causing him to grin at her. His confident grin unnerved her. It sucked all the confidence she had a few moments ago right back out of her. She now felt more like a wounded animal before a ferocious beast. You'll agree, Naruto replied confidently as he leaned forward and opened the briefcase once more, giving her a view of all the money. Because in all honesty, you don't have any other options, he said. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fist in anger and frustration. She was well aware of her situation more than anyone else, but to have it thrown in her face like this and used as a tool for negotiations made her blood boil. I know how much debt you've racked up trying to keep this establishment of yours open. I also know that at this point you won't be able to keep the doors open much longer, he stated as he brought his hand up to his chin as if she was thinking. I'd venture a guess that you have less than a month before you will have to close this place down for good, he said, looking around at the room. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. She just sat there, staring at the man in front of her, powerless. I could make it work, she whispered. Naruto shook his head sympathetically at her before he responded. No, he said softly. No, you can't, he said, causing her to bite her lip. Once this place shuts down, your girls are going to find another place to work easily with your competitors. And then it'll be just you that's left, he stated, laying out her future before her. And then what are you going to do when the debt collectors come to collect? He asked, staring at her intently. She had no response for him. I'm offering you a way out of the hole you're in, a chance to breathe easily again, he said as he leaned forward. She said nothing, just stared at the briefcase of money in front of her in a trance as a million thoughts rushed through her head. All she could think about was what she would have to do to pay everything back if the brothel closed its doors, or what they would do to her. The thoughts sent a shiver down her spine. The girls! She thought as her mind drifted to the girls who worked for her. A lot of them were in difficult situations of their own, and she knew what would happen to them if they went to work for one of the other brothels. They would be abused, beaten, and forced to do all sorts of depraved acts by the drunken bastards who frequent those places. I can't let that happen, she thought as she gripped the fabric of her kimono. I can't, she repeated to herself. My girls will be looked after? She asked, her eyes glancing up to meet his. That will be up to you, Naruto responded, noticing the conviction in her eyes. As I mentioned, you will still be the madam, he stated, leaning back into the couch. Of course, that means you will get a 30% cut from everything we earn here, he added with a smile. She was surprised by that piece of information as she had not expected him to give her a cut of the profits. She had initially expected that he would pay her a salary or something similar. I'll do it, she said with conviction in her voice as she stood up from the couch. She did not trust the man in front of her one bit. At times during this whole interaction, he downright terrified her. But right now, he was the only lifeline she had, and she seriously doubted another would come in time. Naruto looked up at her and chuckled before motioning for her to sit back down. Slow down, he said as he motioned for her to sit. There is still a catch that you have to be aware of, he admitted, making her nervous. I need to make sure my interest in all this is protected. And by interest, I mean my involvement in what's about to transpire, he stated, folding his arms across his chest. I can't have you suddenly developing cold feet and running to the authorities or having my involvement slipping out somehow, he said in a serious tone while staring at her with icy eyes. That's where this comes into play, he said, flicking his wrist, producing a small piece of circular paper with an intricate seal drawn on it. What is that? She asked in a fearful voice as she stared at the paper he held in his hand. She may not have been a kunoichi for long, but she was one long enough to know the dangers of seals. I call this the Dead Man's Oath seal, he stated as he stared at the seal. This will prevent you from speaking, writing, or otherwise communicating any matters concerning what we spoke about here today, and any future dealings we conduct together, he stated with a smile as he stared at the shocked woman. If you try to communicate to anyone about anything I deem to be restricted information, this seal will automatically activate, inflicting severe pain and temporary paralysis, he said coldly as the air in the room suddenly shifted and his eyes became colder. The more you resist the seal and try to spill any secrets, the more pain you will be in until the seal triggers the termination mechanism. Killing you, he said, causing her eyes to widen in horror as she stared at the little piece of paper in Naruto's hand. So, still want to join me? He asked with a mock chuckle. She hesitated for a long while before she spoke. I do, she stuttered out. If there were other options available to her, she would have taken them, but right now all she had was the beast sitting across from her. Wonderful, Naruto said cheerily as he stood up with a wide smile. Seeing him stand up, she jumped to her feet, not knowing what he was about to do. No need to panic, just need to put this on you, he said, gesturing to the seal in his hand. Where does it need to go? She asked, clearly still nervous about the whole situation. At the back of your neck, Naruto replied as he walked around the table towards where the woman was standing. She slowly nodded and turned her back to him, something that terrified her. He walked up to her, sliding his hand under her long flowing hair, pulling it aside. He placed the paper just over the nape of her neck, right where the brainstem was located, and channeled his chakra into the paper. Yoru felt a burning sensation at the very same spot as the seal engraved itself into her skin. Removing the paper, he saw the seal visible on the back of her neck before it slowly faded into her skin, disappearing from view. "All done," he said as he stepped away from the woman. She brought her hand up to her neck and rubbed the spot where the seal was imprinted, but she couldn't feel anything there. "So what now?" she asked, turning to him to see him putting his hood back on, getting ready to leave. "Now you fix this place up," he said, looking around at the worn-down office. "And pay off some of your debt," he added, glancing at the open briefcase on the table. "You also might want to put that somewhere safe," he said, causing her to shut the case and seal it inside the same scroll Naruto unsealed it from. "Right?" she said, tucking the scroll into her kimono. Naruto nodded to her from under his hood and turned to leave. "I'll be in touch," he said, walking up to the door, about to rip the tag off of it. "Wait!" she yelled out, stopping him. "How will I contact you?" she asked. He turned his head to the side and replied. "You don't," he said, bluntly surprising her. "I'll contact you if anything comes up," he added, turning back to the door. "What if there is a problem?" she asked, stepping closer to him. Naruto turned around and stared at her coldly. "I am about to make you the queen of the red light district and one of the biggest players in this village," he stated, stopping her in her tracks. "I suggest you figure out how to rule," he said before turning around and ripping the tag off the door. He then swung the door open, startling the two guards outside. Without another word, he just left, leaving a stunned Yoru standing in place. Naruto walked down the hallway and back down the stairs in long strides. As he exited the brothel, he tucked himself into a nearby alleyway and disappeared via the body flicker technique. Senju compound. Naruto appeared inside the main house of the compound in a swirl of leaves. When he appeared, he saw the clone he had made earlier standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Smiling at the clone, he dropped the transformation and returned to his normal appearance. Nodding to the original, the clone walked up to Naruto and extended his arm. Naruto took his arm before it turned into wood as he began to reabsorb the wood back into his body. "Another productive day in the books," he said to himself as he walked over to finish the dinner the clone had started preparing.